Oh, all right. One additional piece of information I'm going to pass on. Brian told me that when we make those payments to MCSO for the posse, that it's considered a donation. We don't have to pay them. We don't pay them though. So, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Ready, Henry? Jay's going to be a little bit late, so I'm going to get started if you don't mind. Hi there. We'll get started since Jay's going to be a little bit late, and he asked that we could get going. The first thing to do is a roll call, please.
Mayor Schlum is absent at this time. Councilmember Cantino?
Here.
Councilmember Leger?
Here.
Councilmember Brown?
Here.
Councilmember Hanson is absent. Councilmember Elke?
Here.
Vice Mayor Dickey?
Here. Thank you. The first item is the consideration of Resolution 2012-06, declaring and adopting the results of the primary special recall election held on March 13th, 2012. I see there's no staff report planned. Is there anything anybody would want to say about that? No? Well, okay, then we have to have a motion, please.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to accept the recall election, adopting the results. Any discussion? Or anything from the public? Or we're not, are we doing? Okay. Is there anything from the public? No, ma'am. Okay, thanks. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Vice Mayor 5-0.
Thank you. The next item is discussion with possible direction related to any item included in the League of Arizona Cities and Towns weekly legislative bulletins. We included issues 1 through 10. Those are right from the beginning of the session. Is this for Andrew or for our town manager?
Madam Vice Mayor, members of the council, we have had several requests from the League of Arizona Cities and Towns this year to weigh in on certain bills of the legislature, and because the council hasn't given any legislative direction with respect to any broad areas or specific bills, we felt like it was important to make sure that there was an opportunity for you all, if you had requests from the League, to consider them as they came up. We're getting close to the end of the session, so this is a little bit tardy to be on here, but nonetheless, the best way that we could think to do it to make sure that people in the public would know how to frame what the parameters of the discussion might be was to use the legislative bulletins, because that's really the only printed document we have from them other than random emails we get from the League every now and then when a specific item will come up. So it's limited to those things that are listed in the bulletin. They're cumulative so that the newest one is on top in the packet, and then those issues may be discussed in prior issues as well. But since we hadn't given you any of them, we put all 10 of them in there just in case there's a topic that didn't pop up in the most recent version. And I know that the ADWR bill was one that the League was looking to us because the town of Fountain Hills is one of the few communities affected by it that doesn't provide water service and have any mechanism for passing that fee through. But otherwise, it's wide open on those topics that are in the bulletins.
Thank you. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add or say anything? I'd like to comment a little bit on it, if that's okay. I think what this does is it gives us an opportunity to have some input. We get these updates every Friday, and it's really all the work is done in a way. It's a very concise and up-to-date list of things that are coming up as propositions or proposals in the legislature that have to do with cities and towns. So it's narrowed to that pretty much. But this is a little bit of an unusual time because there's several bills that are very well closely connected to Fountain Hills, maybe more than would usually happen. So there's sort of two ways to look at this. There's the ideas of having a legislative agenda, and what we did last time, I believe we had a forum that we had for a couple months that we were able to give input if we wanted to the League if we had any agenda items that we wanted. So I think that's pretty good. We have that covered. But this is a little bit more of a hands-on while things are going on. So, for example, the bill that Andrew was just talking about, which is the DWR funding bill, which, as you know, we decided not to write the $30,000 check yet at this point, and this bill has been going through the legislature, unanimously approved. It was a Senate bill, and tomorrow it will be heard in the House Appropriations Committee, and that's, tomorrow, I think at 2. So, hello, Mayor. So what we were looking at was the idea of asking if you wanted Ken, because he is able to do that, he can go on to the legislative online. We can weigh in. We don't have to weigh in, but it gives us an opportunity for something like that it touches us closely to just say, the town of Fountain Hills supports the DWR Bill 1288. It's very, very timely, of course, because it's tomorrow. And also, obviously, the chair is Representative Kavanaugh, but also Representative Ugenti is on that. So that is close to them. A couple others that we might want to consider, if we want to weigh in, would be the Consolidated Elections Bill, which is House Bill 2826. Now, Representative Ugenti looks like she tried to change it to try to take into consideration all mail-in ballots, but that did not pass. So this bill was scheduled to be heard in rules, but it wasn't, which it was kind of interesting because there were about more than 100 bills, I think, on that rules calendar. So the fact that this one wasn't on there, maybe there are some concerns, which gives us an opportunity to weigh in on it if we would like, because basically this consolidated election forces all the cities and towns to have their elections at the same time, and the league is opposing that. So we could see if we wanted to weigh in on that. Part of that obviously has to do with the fact that if we had them in November, we would not be able to have the all mail-in ballots like we did. Came close to 40% turnout this time, so that might be something that we would want to have input on. Any of the other bills, you have all seen them. If there's anything that you want to talk about, please do. Those were the two that I was thinking would be apropos for us to have some input on if you would like, which would basically be to support the DWR bill and to oppose this Consolidated Elections Bill as it stands. Like I said, it looked like she was trying to change it to accommodate us. Anybody have any ideas?
Vice Mayor, if I could direct our town attorney, Andrew, what's the best process for looking at these? I know that in the past, when we've had staff independently weigh in on different legislative legislative items, that that staff person was pretty much ostracized from the community as not representing the community. I think the same thing is true as if you have an individual council person weigh in on an issue like that, which has happened in the past, then they take heat from the community. So what is the best process for us in terms of expressing our opinion? With respect to ADWR, I think as a council here we had voted unanimously not to
table.
Basically to table. That was our message, to say that we were not happy with that particular scenario. But what are your thoughts in terms of process? And the same thing is true with Ken. I mean, if someone calls Ken and says, "Okay, weigh in on this issue," then then he's put into that same compromising situation that the town manager doesn't represent the town of Fountain Hills on this particular legislative item. So it's kind of a catch-22. What are your thoughts?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Leger, that's precisely why this item's on the agenda, so that you all can have a public discussion about a particular item for which the league has requested input, and then Ken will know whether or not he's authorized to go down and speak on behalf of the town with respect to that issue or not. Yeah, if you all don't give direction, then there won't be any testimony by any town staff. Other councils address it in a more global fashion. At the beginning of the legislative session, they create legislative direction, policy direction to their intergovernmental affairs officers, and give them carte blanche authority that if the league is weighing in on it, then it's okay to do so. But obviously that hasn't been the case here, so this item was created to try and provide you the opportunity to weigh in on specific items that you find are necessary and to have it on each agenda so that it addresses the very quick fashion in which bills appear and are adopted in the legislature. So the ADWR one was what prompted the item on tonight's agenda, because that was a request that the League had made, particularly from communities like Fountain Hills that are uniquely situated.
Yeah, for me. So in that regard, if in fact we were to discuss the ADRW further this evening, would it be kind of just a consensus feeling that the town manager walks away with, or are we actually voting whether we're supporting or not supporting, or how?
It's been agendized as a direction item, so that would actually be a council vote.
Okay.
And I think that, in fairness to Ken or whoever else is directed to go down to the legislature and weigh in, you'll definitely want to vote. You won't want there to be any ambiguity with respect to what the council's
That
direction
answers
is.
my question. Thank you.
Councilor Aki?
Thank you. I think it's very similar to what we did when we spoke out against the redistricting, when we were going to be with the river communities, when that was one of the initial ones. We as a council collectively came together and said, we're not in favor of this, and then we collectively voted and said that those within town staff or on this council can speak on this issue. And I think it goes without saying that no one should speak on behalf of this council without the consent of the council or without a majority vote of this council, and no staff member should do the same, especially on issues such as legislation or other issues that could come up within our community or within the state of Arizona. So I think anything that comes out from this dais or anything that comes out from us as council should be a vote, subject to a vote, and go from there. And I think that's just much cleaner, and otherwise I think you get sideways like we did have a former staff member that did. Thank you.
Got any other thoughts on this item? Ken, is this similar to what is done where you've been managing in the past?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I've done a variety of processes, from the council deferring the opinions to the mayor on what they think. This goes back years, but to a legislative agenda, a formal legislative agenda that's a consensus of the council to be advocated well before the session starts. It usually starts back in August, to advocate in case if there's new legislation that the council wants to pursue, usually through the league legislative process on that, and then advocating it as it comes up, or if it comes up in the legislature. Not knowing the process here with Fountain Hills, I'm still trying to explore the processes, so that's why I asked that it be put on the agenda. If the council would like to have some advocacy by the town council on any legislative proposal or any consideration for the legislature, that we bring it to the council and give me clear direction through a vote, and then we can take it. We'll take it from there to advocate that or not to.
Good. Well,
And that's maybe something we can discuss in the future at future councils, to explore on how you want to address a legislative agenda, or not do it at all. It doesn't matter. I can tell you, in the old days, back in the early 90s, or the latter part of the middle 90s, Fountain Hills advocated considerably at the legislature. With a former town manager that I used to work with as an associate that was from Fountain Hills, that used to advocate quite avidly at the legislature, with the direction, I believe, from the council at that time. I know that from time to time it's going to be just the palate of the council if they want us to do that or not. It's fine with me. It doesn't matter what you want to do. The question is we could end up being down there a lot or not be there at all. So I'm trying to explore that right now with you to find out what you want to do.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. That's kind of what I was going to say, because it could get kind of crazy because we don't have the staff and the resources to do that. I worked at the Senate at the time, and Paul would come in, sit in the office, and I recognize that that's probably beyond what we're capable of doing right now, but even as little as being able to weigh in electronically, without going to a hearing, which can take all day, but to make sure that our voice is heard, it's for the record. So, for example, for the water bill, to say we are in favor of it, it would be part of the record, it would be part of the committee, and we would have had our input without having to expend too many resources. It also gives us the opportunity to talk about it here as we haven't really done regularly in the past.
Good, and you probably mentioned this before I got here, Vice Mayor, is that the League of Cities and Towns is what we're reading the documents from, and they advocate broadly on all things municipal and cover most of the ground. And as you said, we don't have a legislative liaison, and nor do we expect to have one. But there are issues that have come up, and I guess it's worked in the past well. Like Councilmember Alke brought up the redistricting, and then we talked about the water ADWR bill, literally the bill we received, and we addressed it. So that seems to be working right now. I don't want to ask staff to get more engaged unless we know we can do that. Related to this water item or anything that's on here tonight that's requiring action quickly, is there any one of these items we need to discuss tonight to ensure we give some feedback if we deem it's appropriate, Vice Mayor?
Mayor, if you wouldn't mind, I could make a motion that we direct our town manager to weigh in to support Senate Bill 1288 as the league does.
And that's the ADWR
Yes.
reversal?
Yes, it's called the Municipal Water Fees Repeal Appropriation.
And
It'll be heard, well, that's the motion, so I'll wait
All right.
and I'll tell you more if you want.
all right, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion on that, or Vice Mayor, some more?
I'll say it'll be heard tomorrow in House Probes on March 21st, so it's a little time, it is kind of timely.
Okay. Any other input on that item? So that's the Senate bill to reverse the ADWR to municipalities that don't have a water, do not control the water. Okay. Any other dialogue, questions? All right, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Mayor, 6-0.
All right, so that'd have to happen electronically, I'm assuming, right?
Yes. And then I have another one, the consolidated election bills, House Bill 2826. I don't know when that'll be heard now because that was scheduled for, the next step for it is Senate rules, and it did not get scheduled yesterday. So I don't know when that next would be, but he can weigh in. I don't know, he could weigh in if it gets to the floor. But I wanted to know if we wanted to oppose that bill, as it would take away our ability to have all mail-in ballots. It would force us to have all of our elections in November of even years. I gave you an article, now I can't find it, of course, but where Mayor of Mesa was weighing in on how that could interfere with some economic development plans if there was some sort of a vote that needed to be taken to move a project forward, and it could potentially make you wait up to 2 years to do that. So I think that it has real implications with us as far as our mail-in ballot, and it has possible for other things that we may not, that may not benefit the town. So that would be the only other bill. And again, I don't know when for sure. It did go through the House, passed the House, and now it's in the Senate, and I believe it passed one of the committees, so that would be rules then to the floor. So we would be trying to get our opinion in somewhere along that line. And I don't know if you were here yet, but Representative Eugenie, it's her bill, but she was, I believe, trying to amend the part that had to do with the all mail-in ballots, but her amendment didn't pass.
All right, you have is that your motion to
Sure, I
oppose?
move to direct our town manager to weigh in our opposition to HB 2826 as it exists.
All right, do we have a second?
Second, for the purpose of discussion.
Okay. So on this bill, obviously the league's opposed strongly, as it states here, and as do, I would imagine, most every municipality, or most. Most of the larger cities are already required to do November elections, correct? So it would affect them to some extent, but not as much as it would us.
Yes, all the larger cities have been under this rule for, I think, 2 years now, it might even be 3. So it's been in place for a number of years for everything over 100,000.
Now, we've talked about this as council several times about when to do our elections and when not to do them, and every time we've discussed them as a council, I'm not sure if it's been this entire council, but we've said, hey, we don't want to be thrown in with all the other things on the ballot. We like to have our springtime elections and our elections in March and keep it focused to Fountain Hills and have the ability to do now the mail-in to have greater participation, but I'm not sure if that has changed at all. So I would agree that this is something we wouldn't be in favor of, and I'm not quite sure why it would be, why the state would be looking to mandate it. Any other thoughts or questions or thoughts about not taking action on this also?
Mayor, if I may.
Councilmember Leger?
Andrew, when this was discussed before at the legislative level, wasn't there a choice in terms of population? If you were at a certain population, you would have to fall in line with it. If not, you had a choice.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Leger, if you're below the population threshold, you can have your elections during one of the 4 consolidated election dates. Going back now probably a dozen years, the state legislature imposed a consolidated election bill that said that special elections, regardless of whatever it is, local elections, people should know when to look for them. And so they created the 4 dates that we currently work for them. That's the March and May primary and general election dates, or special elections if you have those dates, and then the now August and November dates in the fall. And so those 4 dates have been set and modified a little bit over the past few years, but pretty much are set at the same spot. The cities that are above the population threshold have had to move to the even-numbered fall elections already. Many were already there. Some had to do it as a matter of a change. The city of Avondale went through a charter amendment to do it just in the last year. Went to the voters, asked for authority to change their elections, because in their case, they went from fall odd to fall even, and that extended the terms of all the council members by a year. And so a charter amendment was necessary in order to make that happen. In Fountain Hills' case, it would be less extreme because it would just be a move from March and May to August and November, just be a 6-month holdover instead of a 1-year holdover. But nonetheless, that's one of the issues that's been discussed, and one of the issues that most of the smaller communities are concerned about. But primarily what we've been hearing from smaller communities as a concern is the mail-in ballots. That's been a tool used by most smaller communities to try and save a lot of money on their elections. And if they have to go back to actually holding the elections on those dates, they're not sure how that will affect their election cost or the placement of local measures. They'll always be on the back of the ballot, so people are concerned about that. But other than that, it's kind of just an extension of the law that exists for bigger cities down to everybody.
So in essence, we've had the choice in the past, and if this law passes, we will not have the choice.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Well, it states in the report a lot of the reasons, and maybe you went over some of those, Ginny, with why the league is opposing it on behalf of the cities and towns. But it seems to work now. This is what we have asked to have, is the springtime elections, and we don't want to get lost in all the other national issues and other issues. So we kind of like our spring election, and that's why we've kept it here. I'm not sure why everybody would want to be on the same one. Any other thoughts on this? We got a motion and a second. And I guess that's it.
Mayor, could the motion be repeated, please?
I'm sorry?
Is there a motion can you repeat the motion, or?
Basically, it was a motion to allow Ken to weigh in his opposition to this bill as it stands. She may try to amend it, so that's why I want to say that, so it softens it a little.
All right. Yeah. All right. Any other discussion or questions? All right. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Mayor, 6-0.
Good. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other items? I think those were the 2, right?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks. All right.
Mr. Mayor, going forward on this item,
Yeah.
Next time, you'll only have issues 11 and 12. We won't have 1 to 10 on there, just because we want to keep it more current for you. We just want to make sure we caught up to everything that happened so far. So if any council members have a specific item that's at the legislature that they want to discuss, please let us know ahead of time so we can include that on the agenda so the public will know which ones will be discussed.
All right. And we can, discuss as well down the road if there's additional staff time required to be involved, as we were, I guess, near day one and for the first decade of our town history. But so we can talk about that also. Item 3, discussion and possible action related to preliminary town of Fountain Hills budget and the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2012, including all proposed revenues, expenditures, and new programs for all governmental funds. How are you, Julie?
Hi, Mayor. Fine, thank you.
Good.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. This is, I think, the 4th time that we've met on the proposed budget for fiscal year 12-13, which starts on July 1st of 2012. Some of the things that I want to talk about tonight is reviewing our toolbox options. It's a reminder of our November budget retreat, the tools that were presented to the town council for consideration to balance our projected shortfall for fiscal year 13 and beyond. Some of the tools were moved forward for further discussion during the budgeting process. And for the purpose of this draft budget, we're asking that the council provide some direction which toolbox items the council does not want us to consider. We've already removed from the last meeting updating the Stantec report. That was, I think, $35,000 in the street fund. Updating the Hawking report, we've removed that. And we've taken out any increase in local sales taxes, particularly the telecommunications. So those are already not going to, you won't see them again when we give you the draft of the budget in April. Some of the options that are included in the budget are, these are the tools that staff included. And again, during tonight's budget work study, we've been looking for ratification of those items that the council would like to move forward with or eliminate from further discussions. And again, the action tonight doesn't make it final. This is just for us to move forward to put together the draft budget. So again, we talked about decreasing our recreation subsidy, which should bring in about $35,000 more dollars. Staff reduction in hours and vacant positions, that's already done and been accomplished. A franchise agreement is something that is new and is in the budget for next year. Also included is the use of 10% of our general fund reserves, or $60,000. Renegotiating our services, our community contract services, in addition to tourism, that's about $71,000. And recruiting a part-time prosecutor, that saves us about $50,000. So what has changed? Subsequent to our November retreat, there are several things that have occurred that are contributed to closing our town's budget deficit. One of the things that we like to do is get started on the budget real early, but the challenge with that is that things are constantly changing. So here's some of the things that have changed. Again, the state has indicated that the amount of money from income tax collections is going to be more than what we had projected in November, about $369,000 more. Secondly, we are cautiously optimistic about our local economy and are projecting about $100,000 more in our additional local sales tax. We got the renewal for the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office contract, and that was $127,000 less than what we had projected in November. And the town's agreement with MCSO is it's a full cost recovery agreement, which means that when the county has savings, they pass that on to the town. We were also able to negotiate a decrease in our health insurance premiums at a savings of about $63,000. So we had a 15% drop in health insurance premiums over last year. The most recent update came from the League this afternoon. Some good news and some not so good news. The good news is that the state sales tax projections for cities and towns, the shared sales tax, Fountain Hills is expected to receive an additional $150,000 over and above our earlier projections. On the other hand, our HERF, our streets fund, lost about $200,000. And so staff is going to have to go back and revisit that budget to make adjustments. All totaled, these adjustments have provided about an additional $700,000 in the general fund. So leaving us to revisit these toolbox items.
Julie, about the HERF funds, that's in their budget, right? That's in the legislative budget? Is that where they said they were taking it out? Because there are a couple of different proposals when it comes to that, and I was wondering how definite that feels like it's going to be, because there's a couple of legislative budgets that I don't think are doing that. So what was their feeling about that they were afraid that's a definite?
Mayor Shulman, Vice Mayor Dickey, yes, what this is an estimate from ADOT that they have provided on the portion that the cities and towns will share. It's about a 6% decrease. There is no change in allocation by the legislature, so this is strictly from ADOT. If something came up where they took more HERF revenue, it would change, but this is without any changes from the legislature at all. This is just strictly a 6% reduction from ADOT.
Okay, Mayor, because in the last year, we expected what was it, 100,000 was actually swept. This is basically to do with how much the collection is or how much is actually being distributed, but since there seems like there's a chance that they might not be swept, we still have some hope there, because then it might end up actually coming out well also.
Well, we will definitely lose the $200,000. If there is an additional sweep or anything else, then that would be over and above the $200,000. The $200,000 is again based on ADOT's projections for gasoline sales, which is where this comes from. This chart here is the chart that when we first started this process back in November, and we were looking at shortfalls of every year, starting with next year about $400,000. So that's what prompted the conversation with the toolbox items that staff presented to the council at that retreat. It was the jump start for our discussions, and this is due primarily to the drop in population and our share of state shared revenues, which was a result of the 2010 census. And now this is an updated chart. This is after we've had the council retreat and entered into the toolbox items. This is what the chart looks like now. Now this chart has not been updated from the news today. So this is as of when we met in February. So this is a new look at the next 5 years, assuming that service levels remain the same. It does include the increased maintenance of infrastructure that we've talked about, and that was a priority with the council, as well as the proposed franchise fee with Chaparral Water. The chart does not include the most recent sales tax projections of an additional $150,000. Our next slide is a discussion regarding one of the toolbox items that the staff had originally proposed but would like to rescind. It is related to the issue of charging town employees with a larger portion of their health insurance premiums. I'm going to ask Joan McIntosh, our Human Resources Administrator, to come up and go over the proposal and some of the issues with that.
Welcome, Joan.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As Julie said, at the budget retreat back in November, we were looking at a approximately $400,000 deficit going into fiscal year 12-13. And so one of the toolbox items that was offered was to have the employees start paying more for their health insurance costs in the next fiscal year. However, since that time, we've analyzed a few of the premiums and things like that we were not aware of at the time of the retreat in November. When we received our renewal for calendar year 2012, surprisingly, our premiums had decreased by 15%. So we were happy to see that. That was based on a couple different things. We had a decrease in our enrollment because obviously our staff numbers have gone down. We had a large number of our employees are now enrolled in the HSA, which is a lower premium, and they take on more of the risk themselves by paying a higher deductible, so that decreases our premiums doing that. So with that 15%, that lowered the savings that we had said we would have by $63,000. In addition to that, when we were talking in November, we were looking at a calendar year savings of about $121,600, something like that. Then when we looked at it again, we realized that our insurance contract is on a calendar year basis, and of course our budget is on a fiscal year basis, so we wouldn't be able to realize an entire year of savings. We would only, because we wouldn't be able to change the policy until January 1st of 2013. So we would be looking at $60,800 of savings. So if you look at that 15% decrease and only a half a year savings, we actually come up with about $2,400 extra than what we thought we were going to save in November. So because of that, we would like to ask the council to remove that toolbox item from the toolbox because we don't need that money anymore for those two reasons. However, if the council wants to pursue that, there are some unintended consequences that we hadn't discussed before. One of those would be the disincentive, I guess you would call it, for employees to remain in the HSA. As I said, that's a much lower premium to the employees because they experience the risk of a $2,600 deductible. They pay that entirely out of their pocket up front. If we started charging every employee 25% of their premium, the difference between the PPO premium and the HSA premium would only be about $35 a month. So I would guess that all the HSA enrollees, which is about 80% of our people, will go over to the PPO. Why wouldn't they when they have a lot less risk? They have a $500 deductible, and they're going to go over that for the extra $35. So that next year, I think you would see our premiums increase substantially because the PPO premiums obviously are a lot higher than the HSA premiums. So that was one of the things we didn't realize until we did the analysis. Another thing is the burden that it would have on some of our lower paid employees. For instance, somebody that's making about $28,000, and we have quite a few employees that are in that salary area. If they had family coverage or would need family coverage, their premium would take up about 31% of their paycheck. And when you add on 11% for the mandatory retirement plan, and even if they were in a 10% bracket for taxes, that's about 52% of their paycheck that would be before they even get it, before they receive their net income. So it'd be a big hit to those people that are in the lower income. The other reason I think that I did some more research was with the Arizona League of Cities and Towns survey shows that we would be in the minority if we started charging employees 25% of their premium. Right now, out of all of the cities and towns that are in the league, 70%, all but 20 communities pay 100% of the insurance costs for their employees, and 70% pay 25% or more of the dependent health care costs. Just in our population range from 10,000 to 50,000, there are 26 communities in that population range, and 69% of those communities pay 100% of the employee's cost for the insurance, and 85% pay between 90 and 99%. So as you see, if we would start charging that 25% to the employees, we would be in the minority. And I'm afraid that that would affect employee morale even more than it has. As you know, our employees have not received a merit increase going on 4 years now. It's going to be hard to retain our employees as the economy picks up because we won't be competitive with the surrounding communities any longer for their benefit costs, and also for recruiting employees. When you hire a new employee, the first thing they look at is the benefit package because obviously their health insurance and their retirement plans are very important to them, and they look at that. So it might be a little harder to recruit employees once we do start hiring again. So for those reasons, I would like to ask the council to remove that toolbox item from the toolbox, and if you have any questions about that, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Joan. Councilmember Gantino?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. You said employees haven't had a raise in how many years?
It's going on 4 years now.
What, they got a 1% last year?
But it wasn't a merit increase. That was I guess, a goodwill gesture from the council. I said we haven't had a merit.
But it was a raise?
It wasn't a merit increase.
Okay, so they got a raise.
Yeah. So, Jenny?
Vice Mayor?
Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Would you maybe define that for us? That way we know the difference between just like a cost of living and a merit.
The difference between a cost of living and a merit is that obviously the cost of living is just what it says, cost of living, what food, groceries go up, and what gasoline goes up and things like that. And so employers try to stay
current with that cost of living so that their employees can afford to pay for those things. A merit increase is based on performance. And so if you have a highly performing employee, obviously they're going to get a higher merit increase than somebody that's mediocre or below average. So that's the difference. The cost of living is usually because of the consumer price index. And I know last year for 2011, I just read the report, the cost of living or the consumer price index was like 3.1%. So even the 1% adjustment that we got last July doesn't even keep up with 1 year of cost of living. Vice Mayor?
Mayor, since you're up here, this is probably something that you can't answer because it's more of a philosophical question, but which would you think is preferred as far as, well, cost of living is probably too much, but across the board or merit, or since we haven't done it for so long, how do you go about a merit increase? That's just you have to do evaluations and those kind of things. So do you have an opinion on that, or is that something that you wouldn't venture to say?
Boy, that would be hard to say. The way the budget looks right now, I would guess that a true merit isn't feasible, but at least some kind of adjustment may be because of the revenue increase. Because, like I said, the cost of living last year was 3.1% increase. And if we gave that across the board, that's probably more than, I think, than what's in the budget now. So yeah, it would probably be somewhat of a cost of living increase.
Okay, Mayor Joan, can you give me an amount that it would be for a 1% raise and a 2% raise, which would be double, I guess?
I think the 2.5% was $69,000 in the budget. 2.5%.
2.5%.
That was at 2.5, yeah.
Thank you.
Councilman Rocky.
Thank you. Mayor, I'm sorry, I have another commitment I need to attend to, so I'm going to have to go.
You bet we had a lot of budget talking yet to do. You won't miss much. All right. Good. Councilmember Contino.
What would happen if we would give an increase to the employees that are in the lower brackets and not giving the staff employees a raise? I mean, you're up to the high brackets now, and you're talking about the low ones down here that make $28,000.
Mm-hmm.
So why not give them the benefit of the doubt and give them the raise on a merit and have the staff stay where they are? I don't think the staff is hurting at their salaries.
I just think it would be unfair, probably. That might be a question for Andrew, whether that's even legal to do that. I don't know.
Well,
You can differentiate.
If we
I
could,
think it's unfair.
yeah, on the definition of, all of our employees are staff. Is there a definition that you're?
Well, I'm talking about the people that are making, let's say, below 40,000.
I see, okay. I'm sure, I don't know if that's been considered in other communities or how it's done.
I mean, we're talking about the people that have a burden on themselves. Does the staff have a burden with the salary, the staff managers with the amount of money they're making now?
Well, I think it's generally outside of towns and wherever you are working, there's typically a pay scale based on the job title, based on the skill set.
Well, let's go back to the salary then. Anything under 40,000.
But I think where we've adjusted that before, I don't know if we've done it, maybe we did do a little bit last year, is we've addressed that by adjusting the scale for those jobs. We can move those up. And when do we typically look at that, Joan? Because each job description has a scale that we've agreed to put on it, and then those can move up or move down or change.
Mayor and Council, in the past, we've always done that at budget time when we were budgeting merit increases in the budget. Because if we budgeted 4.5% like we did in previous years for merit increases, I would do the survey of all the positions, and if anybody was below that new minimum, they would get an automatic market adjustment. People that were within the range did not get an automatic adjustment. It was only those people that were below. But obviously that raised the higher end of the salary range too. So, but we did that every year at budget time. I haven't done it now since we stopped giving merit increases because nothing has changed. So,
Councilmember Leger.
Thank you, Mayor, appreciate it. So really, the question on the table at this point in time is what we want to do with benefits. The notion of salary increases, merit increases, so forth and so on, I see is a different item that we can look at down the road. So kind of getting back to that issue, in summary, it sounds to me that we may have made a premature decision. In other words, the data that was provided us during the retreat has completely been turned on its head. And if I'm hearing you correctly, with the cost savings on the premium, et cetera, and the half-year scenario, we're almost like netting out at zero. And now you're talking about unintended consequences. What I'm gathering from what you're saying is this move may, in the long run, end up costing us more money than saving us money. Is that a safe bet?
Yes, yes, because of the 25% increase for across the board. I would venture to say that all the employees are going to go back over to the PPO, which will get a higher premium increase next year, because obviously the insurance company at that point is taking on more of the risk instead of the employee.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thanks for making us aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
Want to make smart decisions here and not penalize folks and hurt ourselves as well. Obviously, health insurance to the town is expensive, and it's expensive to the employees today, and then it just keeps getting more expensive. So what you brought is great news, because it's gone down. Of course, with more people going to the higher deductible, as long as they remain healthy, it'll reflect less cost to them, but obviously they have a much higher deductible that many will probably hit, so they may end up being more out of pocket than they were the year prior. But HSA, as I know, are becoming much more popular, so it doesn't appear to be something that we should consider at this time. And if there's good results going forward, maybe the HSAs or other options will be more and more palatable to folks. So it is a change to bite off that larger deductible, but also those folks can have the health savings accounts and have tax-free dollars and those types of things to benefit from. So I'm glad you could evaluate that before we made a decision. Any other thoughts on that item, the increase of the contribution from staff towards health insurance costs? No, we don't need to vote on each item on our budget. So unless we need to move forward we can vote on the budget, but I think we just need to have discussion so council staff knows where we're going to go next time on these items, unless there's some waffling on any of our parts. But Ken, are you thinking of anything in particular as far as what you're looking at? Because there are so many things. There are so many things in our toolbox, which is good. Everything needs to be on the table, and that's why they're all on here. Some of them have been brought forward this far for more discussion. Folks may not even be considering them, but they wanted to understand them more with the options, council members. But Ken, as far as...
Again, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'm trying to be brought up to speed quickly as fast as I can. I don't, Julie has done the best she could to get me up to speed. There's still a lot of things that I'm a little bit apprehensive about talking to you about because I'm not sure the history behind them. Going back to the beginning, I guess back to November when we were talking about those. But there's a multitude of projects that we need to vet through. And as I've said this, I think a couple of times already in the last week or so, talking about the budget, that we're trying to plan these projects at the same time we're trying to budget for these projects. And sometimes those two don't jive. And that we need to plan them and get them through and then find out if they need to be in the budget. And then we need a budget. We need to talk about the budget for it and its priorities. And what are the priorities that we need to be talking about. I'm sorry, I really don't have a lot of constructive advice for you tonight other than what Julie is having. I support with what the presentation has been today for you.
Good. Let me see what Vice Mayor has to share here related to this item.
Mayor, before we move on to other items, and while we're still talking about the toolbox, I was wondering if we could talk about things that we might not want to go forward with the toolbox before we start talking about new things.
All right, but Julie, what do you envision as we look at this item and then the 43 other items that we're going to be talking about tonight?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. We would like to get an indication of the council as a whole body, how they feel about us taking this out of the toolbox so it won't come back. So whether that's a vote or whether it's just kind of consensus, you know, we'd kind of like to know so that we either, if you want it brought back, we bring it back. But if you're okay with us taking it out, then it won't come back again.
Okay, so sounds like a vote. Sounds like a motion and a vote. Henry, Councilmember Leger.
Yes, Mayor, if I may. And that was why I posed the question, because we've been talking about a number of these things, and until we make a determination, staff doesn't have that direction whether to put that on the sideline or not. These things keep coming in back into play. And I'm not suggesting that we vote on every little thing here, but I think there is the toolbox is something that's been batted around like a volleyball, and I think we need to make some decisions on that.
If I may, obviously, we need to balance our budget. We want to spend as little as we have to. But every item that we move one way or another affects perhaps the decision on the next item. And so we're not, even if we vote on something here tonight, like this item, which seems to make a lot of sense, you know, and down the road, we may have to revisit it because now we've added other items that we think are needed. So it's just difficult to do that. You know, and that's where voting, it just doesn't seem like, I think, dialogue, but, you know, we can do it either way. Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. If the information is correct, and I assume the information is correct, why wouldn't we just take this item of $121,610 and move it from the yes to the no and actually leave it on the inner toolbox opposed to removing it in its entirety?
Good idea. I think that's a good idea.
Mayor?
So we want to move it to the no, Vice Mayor.
Okay, I want to know, for something like this, though, where it looks like it doesn't really make sense to have it on there, I mean, I'm okay with just voting and saying we would remove that from consideration.
All right.
I'm trying to remember. I guess there are other things on here that we
There's a lot
probably
of
would
other
never
things.
do. So it's okay either way. But I don't want any more, if possible, resources or discussion or anything about it, if possible, unless we find ourselves in dire need by June or whatever.
All right. So someone want to make a motion to remove this from this item of the increased contribution of employees to healthcare premiums from our toolbox?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Yes. I'm sorry. Oh, do you have speakers on?
I have 2 speaker cards.
Oh,
When
good.
did you want to hear from the public?
We may as well do it right now, if we could. Yeah, I'd like to do it on the front end so we can hear the public comment. Thank you.
I have 2 cards at this time. Linda Bardot, followed by Jean Schletka.
Great. Hey, Ms. Bordeaux, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. I'm Linda Bordeaux, and greetings, everyone, or most of everyone. I have a couple of minutes. I hope I can have just a little bit longer than 3 minutes. A couple questions just came up about this toolbox item, and I want to make sure I'm understanding the budget. I've met extensively with Julie Getty back and forth with the budget, and I've tried to do my best to understand it, although it's difficult. Am I to understand that most of these savings are predicated on the $600,000 telecom tax being passed? That's not true. Okay, so
Let's go ahead and get your questions out, then we can make note and
Okay, so
address
that's
them
one.
as we discuss these.
That's just one question. Let me go to the jail. I'm not so sure that spending that amount of money, it was 200 and some odd thousand for the jail, at this particular time, 215,000 might be a great idea. There's a lot of things that we need to have done. Paul Moodis showed me a whole slew of things. Infrastructurally that we need to do, wash maintenance, the roads are an issue. The median on the Avenue of Fountains would be very important to promoting business, which might be better spent focused on that as opposed to a jail. I mean, we've operated this long through MCSO and the 4th Street Jail, and I think it could work for another year or so until we see some movement somewhere for more income. The one other item that I was able to research fully was the citizen satisfaction survey at $35,000. So I tried to combine like a $300,000 chunk of savings. It's a statistically valid sample and it's random, and I understand it includes a $5,000 overview for a postmortem on the bond that Mr. Buchanan was responsible for bringing up, which I think is a great idea. And from what I understand, the last one was done by ASU, and they take a sampling of the population and so forth. I took the liberty of getting a hold of several folks who can do this type of work, more of a robocall fashion, which would be inclusive for the population. We could let the population know that we're doing this via Channel 11, some mentions in the newspaper and our other means of communication. That way they could ask 15,000 households is the number I gave them, considering we have about 16,000 registered voters. I figured that would cover most households in Fountain Hills, since most households have couple voters per household. You'd be able to ask multiple questions. It would be able to press 1 for this, 2 for that, so on and so forth. It could be broken down any way you like, and it would also provide consultants to go over whatever metrics that you have set up to understand the total. And it gives you actual figures for what the town will actually stand for. That total amount of money to do 15,000 households would be $7,000. So it's 5 times less expensive than the citizen satisfaction survey that we have put here. The smaller the community size, the less representative the statistical mapping can be. If you had 10 people in a room and you pulled 10%, that's one guy. That might not be representative. But when you do 100 million people and you ask a million, you've got a better idea of what's going on. Not only that, but we had about, and I hear my timer going, I'm almost done. I know for the road bond election, we had somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 responses during that election cycle for that one particular bond. So you want to make sure that you're getting an accurate count of the people who said no and why did they say no. So that's the most important part of that. We have, let's see, I've made some notes here, which I usually don't do. We have significant statistical deviations from the norm in Fountain Hills, such as our seasonal visitors. We also have an age population that's a little bit older than the average around here. And we have like a more diverse political affiliation. I think when I checked, there was something like 750 registered Democrats as opposed to everyone else. So you want to make sure all parts are represented correctly. The sampling by definition excludes this majority of the population, which in turn causes a social discourse. Conversely, asking everyone creates the inclusion of the entire community. Ergo, people feel like they have a voice in the government, and that's one of the directives of the SPAC, the Strategic Planning Commission, is to include everyone. So to sum it up, it's more accurate to ask everyone, it costs less, and it definitely will create what the SPAC is looking for, the community involvement in the political process, which is their goal. So thank you for indulging me for the extra minute. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you. Jean Schletka.
Welcome, Gene.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Back in November, I sent an email out. I had a suggestion or thought about this very building. As you know, it was planned and designed and built at a time when the economy was in a lot better shape than it is today. Our staff was probably more than twice as large as the staff is today. The building is, very underutilized today. And I don't think anybody here would believe that we're going to staff up anytime soon based on the economy and even future plans for building construction. But even beyond that, when you think about technology today, we may end up being a virtual town hall. So you can expect that the staff is not going to grow, if at all. It may even be reduced over time. You think about the location. If this was a vacant lot right now and we were thinking about the theater that we just approved next door, we would certainly be thinking about this being a major commercial facility of some kind. Bar, restaurant, retail shops, offices upstairs. This is one of the 2 anchors of Avenue of the Fountains commercial district, Saguaro and La Montana. So probably if we had to do over, we wouldn't have the town hall here. So, I think we ought to look real hard about this into the future, this facility, and what it might be or could be. And if we could utilize only part of this building for town staff and have, the section that faces the avenue as being retail, some commercial or something of that nature. I'm not sure, but I'm throwing that out. When you think about Scottsdale, when you think of, in your downtown Scottsdale, you're on Scottsdale Road, that's all commercial. Where's the municipal buildings? About a block off. Think about Tempe, or on Mill Avenue. It's all commercial. Where's the municipal facilities? About a block off. And the same thing with Mesa. So I think, you know, and having read that now you're talking about a potential jail for the facility, we ought to think about that as well. Do we really want to do that? We really ought to be thinking about this facility specifically going forward as the future. So the other thing, just quickly, has to do with fees. I'm not sure what the fees will be for the town this year, but I had mentioned in the past also that my feeling there's some inequity on fees. You know, we certainly want to help out the business community, and we have. And we did that in some of the fees that, in a sense, the community is subsidizing. And, you know, for example, we had a discussion not too long ago about the fire inspections. And I think it was lowered to $15 a year for an inspection for business. And that's for 4 firemen spending 30 minutes in that facility. Yet if a resident wants to rent a Ramada in the park, they got to pay $60 to $100 for 1 day. So I think we're going to take another look at how those fees are structured. Thank you.
Thanks, Gene. All righty.
Yeah.
Yep. Councilmember Leger.
Thank you. Julie, I wanted to ask you a question, a clarifying question before we move forward. That second graph you had mentioned that was adjusted to include certain things and not include other things. That February 2012 graph. Did that February 2012 graph include that the state income tax increase of $369,000, the local sales tax projected increase of $100,000, the MCSO savings of $127,000, and the decreased health insurance cost of that $63,000? Did those include that or not? Because I heard you say that it didn't include the most recent 150, so I'm just wondering if it included the others.
Mayor Shum, Councilmember Leger, yes, that chart that you see up there, the February chart, includes everything except the information that we got today.
The 150. So when
except for the 150 today.
So when you received that new information since our retreat, it took us from a deficit into a very small surplus. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks. Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. Julie, I appreciate these charts and graphs that you send us. I would really like to have this updated as quickly as possible as it moves, because this shows how fragile our budget truly is. I mean, if it moves from a deficit into the profit line and we become whole, it just is a tool for us to continue to look harder at our budget. And I see this as very important, so if you would update it, I would appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, so on this health care item, any other discussion on that? All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Mayor, 7-0, I'm sorry, 5-0.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I'll be real brief and kind of go over the next few slides because we've seen them before, but I just wanted to remind everybody what is included in the budget, what the new items are, so that at that point we can have all kinds of dialogue. And what we're kind of looking for is if there's anything that's in here that's new that the council doesn't want us to have in, let us know. And we've got lots of opportunity to add things that aren't in here. We've got an opportunity for that. So I'll go over it real quick. Obviously, we've got increased wash maintenance. That was pretty important. Some new equipment for GIS, so we can bring that up. And again, most of these recommendations are things that we have been putting off for several years because of the economy. We have the ADWR fee that we have it projected in the budget. Still waiting to find out if we're going to have to pay it, but we have to account for it. We planned on having a household hazardous waste event. There is citizens who are always calling us to where they can get rid of their hazardous materials. Our biggest item is, of course, our major facilities maintenance, and there's a schedule of that, but it includes, you know, major air conditioning, roofing, things that we have been putting off for a long, long time that we really need to do. Same with parks, parking lots maintenance. We want to put more teen and toddler events. We want to do the citizen satisfaction survey. That was one of the goals. We've had included in there, we're calling it cost of living or merit. The choice would be to be merit if there was a choice. The law enforcement contract, which only went up by $33,000, and then the fire and EMS contract, that's an automatic 5% increase. That's an increase of $75,000. So all told, those increases in the budget are $728,000 and are included in that chart, the February chart. So we've got them in the budget. They're already included, and it doesn't take us into a deficit.
Related to revenue, Julie, on the chart, actually in the actual budget, the general fund budget, it shows on the handout from February a 6.8% increase in revenues, and that includes things that we can't count on, and does not include things that you just shared as updates. Is that correct? So we have a 6.8% increase, getting us to a projected level of 13.5 roughly. Is that still accurate? 13.5 wouldn't count any franchise fees, correct?
Mayor, members of the council,
Water franchise.
It does include the franchise fee, yes. It includes everything in the toolbox except for what today is.
So the franchise fee of how much would be in there roughly?
We included in there $300,000 because we assumed that whenever Chaparral wants to have their election, that it's likely only going to be a half a year or less. We also included on the expenditure side a contingency of $250,000 in the event that there is no election, in the event that it doesn't pass. So in other words, it washes itself out, but it is included as a revenue, but it's also included as a contingency, meaning it can't be spent on anything else.
Okay. Are there other items that are larger in that $13,500,000 that would either go in or come out?
No, Mayor. There's no increases in any sales taxes. I'm looking for what the new number is now with as far as the revenues with the increase that we got today, but I can't find it right off the top of my head. But I will share with the council that based on the information we got today and everything that's in that you see is in, we are looking at a surplus of about $350,000 for next year.
Okay, thanks. All right, Vice Mayor.
Mayor, just wanted to talk about the toolbox items again before we start talking about the things we're going to spend on, if that's okay.
Are they touched on throughout this presentation, the toolbox items, or? Okay.
No, Mayor.
Okay.
If you want to talk about the toolbox items, I don't have them all listed here. Obviously, they're in your packet, and I have them if you want to go over those again.
Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
I wanted to eliminate the recruit part-time prosecutor item. Anybody wants to comment on that?
Okay. So on our toolbox item, along with all those other items for consideration, there is a part-time prosecutor, which we looked at last year also. I don't remember how far into the budget it got. But can you talk to us about that? Or piece, or did you want to say anything more? Julie?
Mayor, members of the council, that proposal came up, that was a toolbox item that came up in November when we were looking at a deficit of $400,000. It was something that we were looking at as an option for the council to consider. Obviously, it's a council-appointed position, so it was included in the toolbox, and the majority of the council included it. So that's all we've done with that at that point, because again, it's a council decision.
I know Councilmember Elke's not here, and I think I'm not sure where he's at exactly on there, but I'm going to assume he wants to have it for discussion. So it's not going to be gone completely because we want to honor him and be able to talk about it if he wishes. But I'm not sure if council has a lot of desire to consider this more seriously, obviously, because unless there's new information, because we really talked a lot about this last year, and it didn't seem to make sense. The dollar savings didn't seem to be there. And things seemed to be working well. Cost hadn't gone up. Workload ebbs and flows. Sometimes it's higher, and, it's probably not expected to go down much as population grows and so on and so forth, and it seems like we've been getting well represented, so there are a lot of other reasons we didn't consider it, but are there items that factor in now that makes us think we would save $50,000?
Mayor, members of the council, again, this was a toolbox item that we brought forward, and the idea was that we recognized that there would be a reduced level of service. Obviously, if you're cutting what you're paying for, you're going to get a reduced level of service, and perhaps a different level of service, meaning that the idea was that we would have somebody not in-house, but here, available for 4 hours a day, every day, for 20 hours a week. That was the concept, and that's as far as we went with it. But again, we understood there was going to be a reduced level of service, but again, we were looking at trying to come up with $400,000 in savings, and that's all it was.
Okay, so it'd be less service than we have today.
Correct.
That helps. Vice Mayor?
Mayor, I'd like to suggest that if there's something that is being desired as far as service goes, that maybe we can continue some discussions among the players here who are involved with that, so that if there's something that they wish was occurring that isn't, it can be handled that way, and not sort of arbitrarily by us saying hours and when and whatever, so that it actually makes sense to what they all do, the judge, the courtroom, MCSO, and the prosecutor's office. So I hope that going forward, that if there is a problem or some sort of a challenge, that it can be worked out that way.
Again, it was not anything related to past performance. It was only related to the savings and a reduced level of service that we figured we would have to do if we had to cut the budget.
Councilmember Contino.
Thank you, Mayor. It would be completely reduced services. If you have somebody 4 hours a day, what happens if we have an emergency? Do you call him back in? Do you pay for him? So, these are things that we got to take a look at. Right now, from what I understand and what I see in some of the things that have happened, our prosecutor right now is working for less money per hour than anybody else. They're on call 24 hours a day. They can be here 7 days a week. As a part-time prosecutor, you're not going to get anything out of that, and we're still only paying $100,000. I don't see where we're talking about. I think we're way off on the frontage road. We got to get back on the freeway and get some common sense on this.
Thanks, Councilman Contino. Councilman Leger?
I have a tendency to agree with my peers. This is similar to the discussion we had on telecommunication tax, where it just kept rearing its ugly head when we basically didn't want to go down that road. And I'm hoping we can put this thing to bed and just not keep, pulling this back up. Just real quickly, if you're looking at 20 hours a week, which is what I think was suggested, at 52 weeks, that's 1,040 hours. I took the lowest case load we've had in the last 10 years, and that was 841 cases that were prosecuted. Looking at the data in terms of the average, prosecution is, from an hour and a half up to 6 hours, so you come up with an average of 3 hours. And that's a minimal caseload. You're talking about 2,523 hours just to prosecute the lowest caseload that we've had. So I'm saying this not to be redundant of what people have said, but I'm saying this to kind of try to put this thing to bed. This is being penny wise and dollar foolish. And it's not only lowering our level of service, it's providing, in some cases, no service. So that's just, thank you.
All right. I think most of us up here agree, just, there's others that aren't here, so I don't want to remove it completely, but about as much, as completely as we can with respect to those that are not here that may want to add something that we perhaps weren't aware of. So do we need a motion, something along those lines?
Mayor, members of the council, what I'm hearing is that, that's a toolbox item that we want to take out as well, and we will take it out if that's what I'm hearing the council say.
Sure. Anyone want to make a motion on this item?
I make a motion to remove the recruit part-time prosecutor for $50,000 a year.
Second.
You got a second? Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Mayor, 5-0.
All right, thanks.
Mayor, if I may?
Yep.
Oh, 10 is good.
No, go ahead.
All right.
Councilmember Leger?
So we're so polite tonight. If I may, seeing that we are on the toolbox deal here, I would like to suggest that we also remove the reduction by 20% in our community contracts. My rationale for that is twofold. First of all, we made that decision under the notion that we had a $414,000 deficit. I think as a council, we managed our way very, very well through the downturn in the economy. And when we looked at our community contracts, we reduced them commensurate with our reduction in revenues. When we look at our revenues, you know, we've got a long way to go. Our revenues have leveled off, and they're ticking up. And we have a savings of $71,000 there, and when you look at 20%, and I think you redid the numbers, that really comes down to $57,000. And when you look closer at it, it's almost being penny-wise and dollar-foolish, because what that does at 20% is it takes $20,000 away from tourism. And, you know, we've talked about leveling tourism where it's at and also renegotiating and expanding scope of service. I'm not speaking for everyone here, but I recall when we had a tourism presentation back a couple months ago, some of the comments were, this is good stuff, and we need to expand it. So with those things being said, I would like to just suggest that at this point we level those contracts where they're at, and then as we meet with the vendors, we have a number, because that's what you need, to negotiate scope of service, and we can either move up or down. But I think we need to start by leveling it at the level that we were at in FY 11-12. If we look at the get-go, I mean, we've brought these down, you know, close to 40%. So those are my thoughts, and I would like to suggest, and I'll make a motion shortly after discussion, to remove those from our toolbox list. And in terms of paying for them, I know the mayor said when you take things away, you need to find money. I think the last time we were together, we took the Stantec report out, and we took the pavement management report out, and both of those come up to $60,000. So there's a wash for you there. But I think these are value-adding services to our community, and also I think we get a return on investment on a number of them. Thank you.
Councilmember Brown?
Thank you, Mayor. I concur with that 100%. I'm not for sure. I did the math, and I didn't tear the tape off and check it, but I believe that the $71,000, it's not quite that painful. It's more like $56,500 that we'll be adding back into the budget. So, I mean, that lessens the pain a little bit, and I have to agree. I would like to come back to at least level, and then I would also like to have serious discussions with the vendors, because the tourism board, in my opinion, knocked the ball out of the park for us. So we need to recognize that. Thank you.
And just to be clear, because of the folks watching Channel 11 or here tonight that haven't been engaged, might see us considering adding the $57,000 or so back, or adding $57,000 to our budget. And what we're doing is we're looking at not reducing community contracts from last year's number. So basically staying at a level number, just to be clear. So that's what you guys are talking about. Any other thoughts on that item? Council or Vice Mayor?
Thank you. Since when Henry mentioned the two reports also, I just want to keep in mind, and of course we don't want to count our chickens, but I think that $30,000 ADWR fee will probably not have to happen. It was unanimously passed out of the Senate.
Good. Good. All right.
Mayor, if I may, move to take that particular item, community services, off of the toolbox.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Councilmember Dickey, Vice Mayor?
Andrew, can I vote on this? Because it's all together.
It's not actually approving authorization of the budget, so this is more just what's going to be considered. If you want to recuse yourself, it's probably easier and still have a majority here.
Did you make a motion or? Oh, okay. What do you want to do?
I'll just,
I won't vote.
Okay. All right, any other discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Mayor, 4-0?
Yep,
We're dwindling.
thanks. Before I forget, the reduction of staff hours and vacant positions, $104,000.
Yes.
How is that made up? Are there positions we're not filling? How many FTE is that? What does this make up?
Mayor, members of the council, one of the biggest ones is we're not replacing the chief building official. I mean, we're not hiring a new chief building official. We replaced that position internally. So that was a position that went away. There was some savings that we did at the community center by reducing the hours. I can't think if there's...
Okay. That helps, thank you.
Anything else?
That's,
From 1.85 to 1.65 at the community center.
okay, thanks.
Anything else?
Is that just a weight loss, 20%? But for somebody,
The primary one was the chief building official because that was a full-time position and there was benefits and all of that. So that was
Okay.
the majority of it.
All right, thanks. And the general fund reserves, the 10%, what was the thought on that one?
Well, again, Mayor, members of the council, that was a toolbox item. I probably wouldn't recommend it now because we don't like to use reserves, but at the time we were looking at that big deficit, so that was an option that we could take reserves and supplement the general fund for the next 5 years and hope that the economy changed. But it's probably not something that I would propose now, but again, it's there and it's up to the council if they want to continue with that.
That item made me think of what we did with our construction revenue, sales tax revenues going from the percentage being changed to get us through this time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's something we consider going back to a more dramatic split with the revenues going in for being one-time revenues going into the capital plan rather than something like this. That's just a thought. Is that something you'd consider, or is that something you'd suggest we consider soon?
Mayor, members of the council, I agree with you philosophically. I think it's a good idea for one-time revenues to be used for one-time projects. The challenge we don't have now, but balancing the budget because we have no construction going on.
Right.
There's very little revenue, but I think by putting it back up to 80% where it was before, I think that is probably something that would be a good thing to do.
I think we'd probably all agree that's a good thing to do if we can, and maybe that's something just to keep aware of. Maybe we can consider doing that with next year's budget, but I don't think we need to address it tonight. But we did bring up that 60,000. Staff's suggesting we do not consider that or do not need to at this time. As our council, do you want to move on 10% general fund reserves item of 60,000? Move and keep that 60,000 over the 5 years in reserves?
I would put that back in the reserve fund.
Or just, Vice Mayor?
Thanks. I just wanted that, well, when we had the discussion when we were doing this, it seemed like it was kind of a no-brainer. So what's changed is, I'm just trying to get my arms around why we would undo that right now.
Mayor, Vice Mayor Dickey, at the time when we brought this up, I think the comment that we made was that we had adequate reserves, that it wouldn't jeopardize our bond rating.
Right.
So that would still be the same. However, the reserves are based on your revenues. So when the revenues come back up, you're going to need to build back up the reserves. So the position would always be, if you can avoid using your reserves, avoid using them. So I would never recommend using reserves unless we were in a situation where we really had very few other options.
With the increase in the revenues expected, if some of those items went over, we'd have to have a larger reserve. I know it's calculated over 5 years or whatever the formula is, but is that part of the reasoning you would say to leave that in there?
Yes, Mayor, that's correct. Because again, as the revenues go back up, we took 60,000 out for 5 years, the 300,000. By year 5, our revenues might be so high that our reserve requirements went back up, and we'd have to figure out a way to put the money back. So if we can avoid using it, that's even better, because then we're well positioned, or we have plenty of reserves, and then we will be well positioned in 5 years.
Okay. All right. Councilmember Brown?
May I move to move the $60,000 back into the general fund reserve
services, use 10% of general fund reserves for 5 years. You want to eliminate that item from the toolbox?
I do.
All right. Any other discussion on that? All right, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Mayor, 5-0.
All right, thanks. All right. Sorry, Julie, I interrupted your toolbox drill down.
That's okay, that's
Are we
great. That's,
drilling down on the toolbox items, or what are we on right now?
this would be great. I assume we're done with the toolbox items, there's nothing left.
There are no,
All right.
there's still things in the toolbox.
Yes, there are some things. The major thing, of course, is the franchise agreement that Chaparral Water needs.
Mhm.
So that, again, we put it in the budget because if they go forward with it and there's an election and it passes, then we have to account for it in the budget. But again, we're not counting on spending it.
Just on that, what would the timing potentially be if we wanted to, if their Chaparral wanted to move forward on a franchise? When would the town begin to see any revenues? And I know you said 300,000, but it seems like we'd like to get a month of revenue, and that's about it. I'm not sure.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I think in terms of the 12-13 budget, it's an insignificant impact because the earliest election you could hit would be in November. So I think we're probably, August is probably not likely to happen because you haven't even yet negotiated the franchise agreement. So getting to an agreement between the town and the utility is a fairly long process. So I think November is your earliest, more likely March of next year, and which means revenue collections would only be that last tail end of the fiscal year.
Also, just fair to council, we talked about it through our goal setting or retreat. We really haven't considered the franchise as a body significantly in the public either. So I think we still need to have some more discussion on that. But assuming we do have that discussion and the body wants to move forward or Chaparral wants to move forward, what's our discretion in that, Andrew? I mean, how does it work if a franchise operator in town wants a franchise? How does that work?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, according to the Arizona Constitution, you are actually prohibited from granting the right to use your rights of way without a franchise. The oddity that we have here was created because that same constitutional provision is not in existence for counties. And so Chaparral pre-existed the town and existed in the rights of way prior to the town's incorporation. What should have happened about the time of incorporation, so 20 years ago now, is that should have been addressed through a franchise election to allow them to continue on the rights of way. What did happen was that the franchise with the county obviously was no longer valid, and nothing happened.
Okay.
So,
But if there was a franchise going place, does a Chaparral put it forward? Does the town put it forward? What's the process to consider it?
in order to operate in the rights of way, Chaparral requires authority. And there are only two ways the town has to grant that authority to be in the rights of way. The fairly unique way created by the state legislature for Cox. Cox Cable has the exact same thing as a franchise via a cable license. So we've had a cable license with Cox ever since they've been out here. They've been operating in the rights of way. That same authority is not carved out in statutes for a water provider, so the default is to have a franchise agreement. So, you know, I don't think you're going to go out and rip the lines up, but there is no authority for them to be there today.
As far as the process that involves the council, what would we get something to come before us to authorize or is it Chaparral petitioning us, or how does that work?
Chaparral, you know, in technical sense, should be the one to petition to ask for a franchise agreement for the authority to operate in the rights of way. It's equivalent to lease of the right of way.
Okay.
You know, for instance, if Chaparral were to come to your house and say, we'd like to put a water line across the middle of your yard, whatever agreement they came to you for the price of that property to put the water line in, that's the equivalent of the franchise agreement. It's just that it was created in 1912 and we didn't have license agreements and convenient things like we do today.
All right, when might we have that discussion?
At some point in the near future, Chaparral is going to have to re-engage the process of establishing their CCNN and expanding their CCNN to the entire town area. That hasn't been completed yet. So in order to get there, one of the order preliminary requirements from the 2005 order that's not expired, but still is out there, was that they get a franchise from the town. So we began the discussions with them back when it was Chaparral, prior to the current owners, when Rob Hanford and the folks were still around. So the discussion's been ongoing for a while, but there hasn't been a franchise agreement proposed by Chaparral yet.
I'm just trying to see how relevant any dollars in this year's and next year's budget is for a franchise, if it's worth considering it all. And what you did makes sense, because you balanced it whether it happens or not. It's a net, so.
Mr. Mayor, my experience in other communities is that franchise agreements are typically a months-long process to come to agreement on what the franchise will say, particularly in a case like this where you have an entity that up until last month didn't have any franchises in any communities because they didn't have any communities that had franchise requirements. They acquired communities that have franchises in them just in the very recent last couple of months. They completed that transaction. So they now have folks who are familiar with the process in Arizona, and they have the franchise agreements from other communities where the water companies they purchased operate. And so I suspect that they'll now have a better understanding of how it all works, and they'll have definitely a preferred form of franchise they'll want to bring forward.
Thanks, Andrew. Councilmember Contino.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The franchise fee, I always thought it would be like when you're out to, like, when you're in a municipality, you don't pay a franchise fee. That's a service that you pay for, and you pay for the fee. Franchise fee would be like if Rio Verde, Tono Verde, or something like that needed our water, then they would pay a franchise fee. So what happens to this is just like a tax. So in essence, what happens when it comes back is Chaparral has his fee, which is like a tax, and then turns around and comes back. Now, according to Chaparral, when I went over and talked to them, they don't even know what this franchise agreement is. So I'm trying to figure out what's going on, and if this is another way to get $600,000 in back taxes every year, we need to take a look at this more in depth.
Good. I think that's why I think we'll have a good discussion on what this is and what it isn't. And generally, is this correct, that because the town owns the right-of-way, and,
that's right,
and providers utilize the right-of-way, there's typically a cost to the town, or a cost that's paid by a cost that's paid by providers to utilize our property, and potentially there's some cost to us by allowing people to utilize that. Is that the reasoning for these things?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, in a nutshell, that's exactly what it is. The reason that the franchise provision exists in the state constitution is because the state legislature, when it put forth the constitution and it was ratified, was intending to prevent communities from giving away their rights of way to railroads. I mean, this is 1912. That was the thing for which communities were trying to bring in. I'm not quite sure what we equate that to now, but so the legislature said, you shall not, and ratified by the voters, you shall not give away your rights of way, essentially. The modern version of this, because of the Federal Cable Act in Arizona, the best equivalent you can find of what a franchise looks like is Cox Cable's arrangement with the town. Cox has had, I think, 4 license agreements now with the town over the past 20 years. And during that time period, Cox has paid 5% of their gross revenues, calculated on the most complicated formula you've ever seen, as the fee, as the lease payment for being able to enter the rights of way at will, and subject only to notice to the town to let us know what's going on, cutting up the streets and doing the things that we typically don't like people to do, cutting up streets and barricading streets and doing otherwise. So Cox has been doing it for a long time. It's the same thing that should have happened quite some time ago with Chaparral. It just never was done.
All right. Well, Councilmember Contino.
I would like to maybe get our state representative to come up here and state some of these laws and see what we got out here. I mean, we're just hearing Cox this and Cox that. We're talking about water that we already pay for here, which is our right. It's not a franchise agreement. And the franchise agreements, from what I understand and what Chaparral tells me, is out boundaries. So this is nothing but another tax, and I would like to have Representative Kavanaugh come up and be here to tell us what's going on.
Not sure. Well, I think so let's have that discussion.
Right.
About franchise, like I had said.
That's right.
We will have a further discussion on franchise. Vice Mayor, thanks, Councilmember.
Thank you,
Martino.
Mayor. Andrew, does Cox on their bill have something that says license so that customers are paying for the license pretty much?
Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor Dickey, I haven't looked at the Cox bill in Fountain Hills, but I know that on the bill I get from Cox, there is a license fee pass through, and it's one of about 9 things it seems like are passed through on the bill.
Yeah, so we'll talk more about the that. I just wanted to figure out how much can we expect if it does go forward. Not much, and not much at least in 12-13. Okay, where were we?
Okay, Mayor, what I'd like to do is go over some new programs that the council's not seen or approved in the budget. The first one is a program that we've had going on for a couple of years. It's a volunteer program for CARE, and that's through the fire department. And what the proposal is for this year is to add, and this is not in the budget, to add $24,000 to the Rural Metro contract to allow for Rural Metro to hire the person to coordinate the CARE program. And Scott LaGreca and Randy Roberts are both here to answer any questions on that. But I just wanted to, that would be a new program, and it is not currently in the budget at that amount, so it would be in addition to.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to hear. Obviously, CARE is awesome, amazing program, and run by a bunch of volunteers. So, yeah, I'd love to hear the thought behind this and what's necessary to continue servicing our community in the way that this group does. Thanks. Good evening, Chief. How are you, sir?
Mr. Mayor, I'm doing well. Council,
Good.
Thank you for hearing me tonight. As you know, for the past better part of 5 years now, or almost 5 years, we've been going down the road with our CARES program, and it's been wildly successful, even though they're a quiet organization because they have to be because of the situation that they're in with the folks who are at their most vulnerable time. We can't have them share those moments and issues with the general public, and there's certainly HIPAA laws that must be adhered to. But just one number that I wanted to share with you. Since they've been up and running, they've had direct contact with 440 of our citizens here in town, and have provided over 434 hours of service to those 440 people. So they are quite busy. Each year that they've stayed alive and met the benchmarks that I put forward to them, because quite frankly I was a little hesitant on giving them carte blanche and then have the program fall totally apart when they're in this type of a service that they're in. And this is not unique to Fountain Hills. This is a model that you'll find in Tempe, Mesa, Phoenix, Scottsdale, Peoria, Glendale. So about 2 years ago, we started carving out little pieces of our Rural Metro contract to help pay for their services like fuel. We made that a line item in the budget. It was about $2,200 worth of stuff, fuel, office supplies, advertising, which they really have used very little of that $2,200 because they are a nonprofit and they do bring in funds, but like every other nonprofit, they're finding it more and more difficult to get grants and awards to replace that money, pay for cell phones and radios and that kind of thing. So they're at the point now where we are so dependent upon one person of this CARES program that if she decided that she's had enough, and she claims that she's nowhere near to thinking that, but we all know in life things can come along that can cause you to take a different path. And we got to thinking that if we had to replace that position, it would be pretty difficult to replace as a purely a volunteer position. So we brought up with Julie that, we would like to make that a part-time paid position, and we would like to bring it into the fire contract. Just because it's cleaner, she reports to the fire department, she reports to me. They're totally dependent upon us for dispatch. And if we made it a town position, Not that she couldn't operate in the town side of the contract. It just would be a little bit more cumbersome. Some questions might come up. And we just felt it would be easier if she stayed under the direct control of the fire chief and lived in the contract of the rural metro town of Fountain Hills, which, Mr. Town Manager has control over that contract on a daily basis. So it's our intent to add her on board at a $24,000 a year salary as a part-time employee, and she certainly puts in more than 20 hours a week. You know, she puts in anywhere from 40 to 60 hours a week, but I felt comfortable in starting it out in a part-time position, and then whatever happens down the road, we can reevaluate the program to see if we want to continue in that direction or take it to a new direction. So it's my hope that we can do that by increasing the rural metro contract by $24,000 to include her as a rural metro employee that's under the direction of me and the town manager in our contract. So any other questions or thoughts on that, I'd be more than happy to try to answer.
Good. Thanks, Chief. Questions, Councilmember Contino?
Yes, thank you. Chief, I understand that this person's almost on call like you are.
Yes, sir.
And I understand that one time she came out during the nighttime and other times it's early in the morning for cases that you've had to deal with.
Yes, sir, Mr. Contino.
So I think that for no more than we're talking about, for the duties that she has, this is something that nobody knows when they're going to have it. Correct?
That's correct. And let me just add, not only does she respond at night, but there's 5 other people who are volunteers and they respond at night. And that response can be as little as 30 minutes or it could be long as 12 or 15 hours. And part of our responsibility in dispatching them is that we also do a welfare check, because there will be times when CARES will stay on scene after fire's left and after the sheriff's office is left, and it's those 2 people that are on the scene. So we contact them every 30 minutes for a welfare check to make sure that everything is going good. But yes, she does volunteer. She does not have a working day job, so she responds not only during the day, but she responds at night, and she looks for relief and help on the weekends and whatever time they need it. So
thank you.
You're welcome.
I know we've went right into it, but can you give a little bit of a body of work that these folks do, generally an example or 2 of?
Well, what they'll do is, when requested by fire, or if they're requested by the sheriff's office, and I'd just like to make a general statement that for the sheriff's office to so encompass them within their world, and sheriff's office is kind of really very selective who they allow to play in their world, and they've adapted to and adopted CARES, and they call from probably just as much, if not more, than we do. But what they do when they get on the scene, they interact with the citizens who are in a very difficult time in their life. They don't know what to do, how to do it, where to go to get done. And these volunteers walk them through that process of getting them down to the hospital where their loved one may be, to contacting a funeral home for them, to getting them shelter at night if it's a fire situation, and food. They were very active in the last fire we had where the people lost their homes. CARES collected food for them and donations. And so they're kind of like their security blanket for that period of time when they're really confused and not thinking totally rational, and they're able to help them through that. So these people just aren't your ordinary day-to-day citizens. You know, they're trained, certified, and they have a passion for what they're doing. If they don't have that passion, they usually don't last very long in CARES.
They also have a decent amount of expenditures out of their own pocket as well.
They do, and like I said, they try to rely upon grants and contributions through their 501(c), but as we all know, those are getting leaner and leaner, and so we try to provide them with a little bit of assistance financially to make sure that they're successful in doing what they do.
Councilmember Leger.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, I would agree with you that their service is valuable and kind of falls into the area of crisis management. You know, after sheriff leaves or you folks leave, they're there as kind of a just a continuation of the service that you all provide. I just had a couple logistical questions. You mentioned pulling this into the rural metro contract, so I would imagine in the future when we go out for a new contract, this would be an integral part of the contract. Is that correct?
If the, Mr. Leger, that's correct, but I believe that if you do approve of this, that prior to or just shortly after the start of this fiscal year budget, this will have to be added into the contract with an
amendment.
Either an amendment that the town manager and rural metro can work out, or if Andrew needs to be involved in putting that paragraph in there.
And I don't want to split hairs on it. I just want to understand logistically. So let's say in theory that you bring this into your contract, would that be considered, let's see, 0.5 FTE? It would be a half of position. Is that what you're looking at?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, I'm wondering if your organization operates under the same constraints as the town does from a human resources perspective, which is if we have someone that's 0.5 that's probably hourly and not salary, if they're working more than 20 hours, then we're obligated to pay them for the hours that they work. So it's just something we need to consider. If this is targeting one person's position, which is your intention, that there may be an issue if that person exceeds X amount of hours in a week or a month or whatever the case may be, unless there's a voluntary situation there that changes that law, that employment law. And Joan, would you mind addressing this? Because if we're funding this through that contract, does that present an issue? And if so, I'm sure there's a workaround.
Joan?
As our existing contract works right now, even though you have no part-time employees, if our employees work more than their 24-hour shift, or if Randy and I work more than our 40-hour shift that you pay for, there's no compensation for that. And if there is any compensation for the hourly employees, Rural Metro pays for that, not the town. We do not give you a bill for the extra overtime hours that we may put in. We have a large fire in the wash and our crews have to work an extra 12 hours. You don't see that.
I understand that. I'm just wondering how that applies to this new position that we're adding. That's my question. If it falls into this particular person needs to be compensated for more than 20 hours and Rural Metro is paying for that, then that's all fine and good. I'm just trying to understand logistically, because we run into this a lot with our part-time employees.
Yes, and I guess I would suggest in a situation like this that maybe she could be made a salaried position, because she does make independent decisions. She works a lot on her own. So she'd be put on a salary, and it wouldn't make any difference really how many hours she worked, because there would be no overtime.
Okay. So that's the workaround.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that's how she'd go into the budget.
Okay.
As a salary position.
Just want to understand, this is all new.
But she's not going to be punching the clock.
Yeah.
And if rural chooses to use her over and above what we use her for, then it would be on Rural Metro's dime, not yours.
Just want to understand how it's going to operate.
Perfectly.
This is new to
Good
most
question.
of us. Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. The contract that we have with Rural Metro has an automatic, usually an automatic index that it goes up. And so just in case people are thinking in terms of that, I wanted to remind everybody that last year you didn't do that. So I think there is some flexibility there. So I don't want to shy away from this just because of the idea that this actually increases the contract even by a little bit, and that, you know, we could be compounding that year after year, because last year you did certainly give us a very good consideration.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Dickey, yes, you're correct, and just a look back in history, when you renegotiated the new contract for the 4 years that we're into now, and I believe that was 2009, rural rolled that last year's base back 3% to start the new base, and then the first 2 years of the contract, they negated the 3% increase. So actually, since the start of this contract, rural has not charged you 9%. So if you pencil that out, that's about $350,000 that you saved up front to date, not compounding any of that going forward, which has made my budget interesting. But yes, Rural Metro has done that.
Yeah, we thank you. Thank you then, we'll thank you now for helping us through that very difficult time. Any other thoughts on this item?
Are we voting?
Thank you, Chief. Julie, anything more on this item?
Yes, I did want to just let the council know for full disclosure that this would be a new program, and with that program there's additional costs as well. So for this program there is a vehicle, and so a new charge would go onto that budget to set aside the money that we do every year to buy a new vehicle. I think it's in 2015 that they are going to need a new vehicle. Currently they have a vehicle, and the town pays for the gas. So I just want to make sure that the council knows that that would be an addition to it as well, just so that everybody knows there's more cost than just that staffing.
So that would be the replacement program?
Correct.
Okay, thanks. Councilmember Brown? Do you want to make a motion?
Sure, Mayor. I move to approve the $24,000 care package for to be added to our budget.
Second.
All right, any other discussion? All right, all in favor, indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Mayor, 4-0?
Thanks.
5-0.
5, yeah.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I'm going to skip the transportation one just for a second. I want to talk about the at the retreat that was brought up by the council regarding some funding for the posse, but I never got any indication of if there was any funds attached to it, what that looked like, and so I just wanted to bring that up and see if that was something that is to be continued, or if that's just something we're going to not go forward with.
Thanks. Good. And that's the next item on the new program.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, we've talked about, obviously, for everybody out there, I mentioned this today at the Rotary, is the posse's contributions has dropped very low, and so there are more posse members, volunteers, that want to do what they like to do, which is patrol and help the sheriff's deputies transport prisoners and to keep our deputies on the streets and all those different types of things, do the vacation watches that a lot of folks use them for. But fewer of them are paying or contributing to the posse, so the posse's been hurting. And so we talked about, obviously, the great value the posse has because they drive cars similar to the sheriff's office. They're dressed similar fashion. The presence is appreciated, and obviously the other things they do in town are appreciated. But they have about $2,000 of their own investment to buy the uniforms and get their training, and it's kind of similar to what some of the folks there in CARE do. They get their training and volunteer. First they pay, and then they volunteer. And then the sheriff's office pays for their fuel, I believe, if I remember right. Is that right? Yeah, getting a nod. But that's really it. So because they're a separate organization. So we thought, wouldn't it be great to have additional, because there are posse members that would like to do more, but really can't afford to maintain the vehicles or change the tires and those types of things. So we wanted to consider, is there a role for the town here? It's been traditionally fundraiser based, which is probably the best method because it's a community service and it's supported by the people that utilize it and find value in it directly. And but we brought it up, as you mentioned, as something the return on investment would be decent. So do we make it a matching program where the town would match, or there's been fundraisers, so there's been more efforts to bring more dollars in, but I think the need is still there. So and there's more opportunity for them to do more if there was some greater funding. And the funding we're talking about, dollar amount, Julie, would be between what dollar amounts?
Mayor, members of the council, I didn't get an indication of how much, but I think what we would talk about is rather than just donating money, because I'm not sure that that's something we could legally do, but be more for contract for a service. For example, now they have purchased a golf cart and are doing patrols in the parks during the day. And you know, that may be a service that we could purchase from the posse.
Yeah, and they obviously don't do what the sheriff's office does, the professionals, but they do and can provide services that help out the community. Okay, but I think if I remember, just for reference, we were thinking maybe a $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. It wasn't like a $100,000 amount or anything like that. Council, thoughts, Vice Mayor?
Mayor, yes, I'd like to know what the specific desires would be, like what service very particularly would we want? Like maybe asking the captain to come up and tell us what he might have in mind so that we would know about what we're looking at and what the service would be.
Mayor, if we could just, maybe, because I think we'll come back to the council with what the program looks like. If we have an idea of how much money just to put in the budget so that we can move forward, then we can come back with what the program looks like. Unless we want to. Okay.
Council. Captain, if you're here, giving us your time, thank you. You've talked to us, perhaps initially start with what the posse does that helps us leverage what you folks do.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. Bev is passing out an email that I received from the posse commander, Jeff Helmakangas, and I apologize a little bit for the format of it. I'm going to have him clean that up, but that just gives you kind of a brief overview of the services that they provide to the citizens and to us here in the Sheriff's Office, specifically in the town of Fountain Hills. And I think this area would be the best measurables that they could give you based on their limited training and expertise. You know, the biggest number I see there is the fact that they do donate 12,000 man-hours to the town of Fountain Hills per year, so obviously that comes out to about 1,000 hours a month. And that frees up the deputies to continue to do their job, respond to the calls for service and that. The Fountain Hill, we have transportation of inmates down to the jails, which can be something that's measurable. They do traffic control for us. They work special events. Just a lot of those things that you see here are, it's a big value to the town. When we talk numbers up there, I see the 2 question marks, and I don't want to shortchange them, but I also think with this program being somewhat new, in my head, the number figure that I had would maybe be somewhere between the $18,000 and $24,000 mark. And that'll give them, from what I understand, having talks with them, $1,500 to $2,000 a month is about their average operating expenses to keep the vehicles maintained, office expenses, electricity and things like that at their office. So that would always be able to keep them out on the road. The funding that would come in from the public through donations, through their fundraising efforts would allow them to maybe, purchase the uniforms for their members, purchase the ammunition and things like that they have to pay for themselves right now. But that dollar amount right there, I think, would just cover their monthly expenditures that they have right now.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Leger.
Captain Joe, are you aware, as Julie are aware, they're housed in that trailer on Sorrel Boulevard. Are they paying? Do they own that trailer? Is that on town property? Are they paying rent for that? Or we're talking about overhead expenses?
Correct. The actual trailer belongs to the sheriff's office. Uses that. That's ours for our storage right now. Okay. They have the building behind it that somewhat looks like a garage. Yeah, and my understanding of it, that's MCO donated that building and the use of it. So they don't have any mortgage or anything like that or rent expenses. What they do have is the utilities and maintenance, and then there are some minor office expenses that they need to pay for, supplies and things. Then the majority of it goes to the maintenance of the vehicles. The tires, oil changes, things like that. Their vehicles are getting up in age a little bit. They do have to purchase those vehicles as well. So again, as they get older, more maintenance is required.
You know, Mayor, we've never had an opportunity for the chief or the commander, whatever his position is, perhaps that's Jeff, to present before us, but in order to make a decision like this, I think we need to learn more about all of this, particularly when we're talking numbers. For example, they engage in vacation watches, and I've talked to posse members, I know a few of them, they do an awesome job. And they've mentioned to me that they may have to discontinue that service because of budgetary constraints, manpower constraints, so forth and so on. But organizationally, have they ever considered, as a volunteer organization, fee for service? You're talking your private citizens that more than likely could afford a service, and they're getting a service for free. I mean, I'm not sure how that benefits the whole community. So that's the type of question I have. I mean, fee for service, you could help them with their resources. Another question I had, in terms of looking through the detailed budget, I noticed that we budget $96,000 for incarceration and transportation downtown, and I don't quite understand what part of that MCSO we're paying for, and what part they engage in, and how those dollars are utilized. So that's another question I have regarding all of it.
On that item, is there potentially, if we have additional posse members able to work and with cars that can drive, that we might be able to reduce our expenditures on transportation and that sort of thing? Or perhaps we can't count on that, but is that something that might benefit us on the other side of the expense equation?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Leger, that part of it, of the contract, I would have to look into with our finance division, see exactly how they're defining that part of the budget. I do know this. We talked about the fee services that the posse could do. I think the issue there is, since they are a nonprofit agency, they can't actually go out and solicit for profit or to demand that you pay a fee. They can ask for the service, they can ask for a donation, but to specifically say, we will come and do this, but you need to pay us X amount of dollars, is getting them out of what their purpose is to do it.
It's just once again, I'm not opposed to any of this. I'm just trying to understand how they're set up financially, and it's very possible that could be structured within a 401c somehow to still work for them. So it's just food for thought. And the other thing that I came across when I was looking at the budget is that I noticed when we have recreational events that our staff budgets for traffic control, security, so forth and so on. And I often notice that we have MCSO full-fledged officers there as well as posse officers there. And do posse folks get paid individually for their services in that regard?
No, with the events that you may see them at, what will happen is they'll get a donation from the sponsor of the event or the promoter of that event at a rate that they negotiate with that promoter, and usually the rate's a very reduced hourly rate based on manpower that they provide to them. The one thing that we have to keep in mind is the posse doesn't get their authority unless they have a deputy sheriff present. So we've been working with whether it's the chamber, with the town itself, and trying to find a balance where we can allow the posse to work as much as we can, but they also do have to have the supervision of a deputy sheriff there.
Sure, I understand that. I'm just trying to get clarity on, we're budgeting money for transport and they're involved in transport. We're budgeting money for traffic control and security, and they're involved in that. So I'm just trying to understand our own expenditures related to the MCSO contract and how that may in fact overlap with the work that the posse is involved in. Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Mayor, thank you. The vacation watches, when we discussed last year during our budget, and the budget committee had come back and suggested that maybe we could cut some of the patrols, and I think it was like $200,000, and one of the ramifications of that was going to be affecting some of these services, but we didn't do that cut. So I also would want a real specific scope of work. Like let's say what we were just now talking about with Care Fountain Hills, that's a service that they don't do. That Rural Metro is kind of like after everybody leaves and they kind of help them and walk them through those. So is there anything like that or comparable? I don't expect you to answer now, but just that would be something that the deputies themselves wouldn't be able to do, would be a good thing if they could. So I guess maybe what you're hearing is we're trying to make sure we're not doing an overlap, or if there's something that's already in the contract to just say, well, okay, here's $20,000 in general, probably isn't where we want to go. I think that's what we're really looking for. And for me too, to make sure that it's absolutely totally local, so that the fact of us doing something that might be freeing up, but it's freeing up another community or another area, that I want to make sure that everything is absolutely concentrated on Fountain Hills, so that it doesn't mean that posse members are doing other projects somewhere because we're supplementing them here.
And one of the things with, we talk about like the vacation watches would stop. Yes, the posse would stop doing them, but the burden would then fall on the deputies to do them. So one of the things just keep in mind is when they come back to you, or when we're back up here and with maybe some more specific deliverables, those things are all going to be deliverables that if they do not take care of it, it will get done, but it's going to be based on the deputies having to do it. So it's kind of one of those things where if we want more visibility, more proactive patrols and things like that from the deputy sheriffs that are up here, then by putting these other tasks onto the posse, that's what it's going to do to free us up to go do that.
That's exactly what I mean. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mayor,
All right.
I think that's clearly where I was going. It's just a scope of work. I mean, Julie mentioned, just for example, patrolling the parks with their new golf cart. That is a very specific service that could, free you up from doing that. And we do have a number of issues down at Golden Eagle Park, so that is a valuable service. Thanks for answering our questions.
All right,
Thank you.
so we'll revisit this, it sounds like. Any other comments on this item?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, am I hearing then that we would like to bring back maybe in a community contract form for the posse that would be to talk about the deliverables that they would provide for a certain fee, and we bring back a fee to you for budget consideration?
I just don't know where that would fall as far as reporting and, maybe we need to know more about how they're associated with the sheriff's office, and are they reporting to the town manager now, or I'm not sure what we could do in a contract.
I'm not familiar with it enough to know tonight, so that's why I was wondering if we would maybe talk about a number, talk about potential agreement, contract, whether it's going to be part of the MCSO contract or a separate community contract, and bring it back with some deliverables.
Or some sort of a match, Councilmember Contino.
Thank you. I think what we need to take a look at is that the amount of savings the MCSO has been giving us, and I think that we could work on something on that basis, and we're not going to really be paying a lot more if we go back and look at their savings that they're giving us on the contract now, which could kind of level itself out.
And I mean, the point is not to ask the sheriff's office to do less and save us money, because I think most of us all of us would like to have as many deputies around as we can to mitigate crime and such, but we would want our deputies to be doing as much of the heavy lifting that they're trained to do, rather than some of the things that the posse could help them take off their workload, so that they could do more of the things that they want to do and that we need them to do. So I'm not sure what it would look like coming forward, but I'm confident there's several people here that could come up with a great plan to bring it back to us. Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I too look at it as a community service type contract, and with just a little more input, not a little more, quite a bit more input with the job description and at least the scope of dollars that we're talking about, so we can try to get our arms around it, massage it, and send something back to you would be really beneficial.
I will do that. I will get with Commander Hal McCangus and have him put that package together for you.
Good. And obviously he'll be familiar with little ad hoc group that's been working on ideas and fundraising and other things to get their input, so that'd be great. Thank you very much, Captain.
You're welcome.
Are we done, Julie?
Actually, Mayor, what I'm going to do then, from what I heard, is I'm going to put a dollar amount in the budget just so that we have something in there so we can move forward. The goal is to get the budget out before April 1st, so we have time to get out to the public. So we'll put a number in, and of course, then it's going to come back to the council. And these numbers aren't final anyway. After there's citizen input through the month of April, I'm sure there's going to be other changes. So I'm just going to put a dollar amount in.
Gotta start somewhere, right, Julie?
Yes.
All right.
Exactly.
Councilmember Contino?
18 to 24.
Now she'll work with them and figure out what they think is best.
As a starting point, yeah.
We can always change it.
Right, exactly.
We can start with that range.
Okay.
The next thing is the conversation we've been having on the jail, the proposed jail, that we retrofit our 2 holding cells and make them into a jail. The concept is, again, this started out as a revenue producer, that we would be able to have people come in and actually stay there as opposed to going to Tent City. We would charge them a rent. Obviously, there's a lot more work that needs to be done on this. What I would propose is what we have in the budget, in the CIP budget, is the cost to retrofit the building. What we don't have in the budget is the operating cost associated with it, but there's still a lot of pieces that we need to work out and vet before we decide whether to move forward with this project. So just to get some feedback from the council if this is something we want us to continue to explore or if it's just something that is dead in the water.
Thank you, Julie. Councilmember Contino?
Thank you. I think that from what I understand and see about some of the things that what's going to happen, it's going to be about a 4-year return before we can start breaking even on what we have of the cost outlay and everything else. I think right now we're about 1 or 2 light years ahead of ourselves. I think we ought to just kind of scrap this thing and wait and come back on the next budget to do it because we're talking out there in space and we don't know what's going on. We don't know all the factors, like you're saying. We don't know internal costs. We don't know anything else. And there's nobody can really tell us that. And I think that even the other places, the other stations, police stations that have it in the valley, can't really put dollar amounts on everything. So I like to see it tabled and out of this budget for this year.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else want to comment or want to get a motion from Councilmember Contino? Any other comments? Councilmember Contino, you want to make a motion to?
I make a motion that we remove the jail CIP budget for $215,000 to the next budget year or later.
All right. Do we have a second? All right. Any other discussion? Julie, any other thoughts on that? No. All right. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
There's 5-0.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, Mayor, members of the council, we also received a request subsequent to our meeting with the council for an additional $28,000 from the Fountain Hills Cultural and Civic Association. That would be to put landscaping in the event circle. That is not included in the budget. Again, this request came after we had put it together, so we're bringing it forward to the council for consideration. Mark is here to answer any questions. He's been in contact with Jerry Miles on that item.
All right. Mark, you want to brief us on this item?
Mayor Slum and members of the council. Excuse me? I'm fine, thank you.
Sorry about I was getting late on my greedy.
You may recall that a number of months ago, Mr. Miles was here and showed a concept plan of the Centennial Circle. And at that time, the council approved the expenditure of some funds for the paving. Subsequent to that, Mr. Miles came back and requested that the balance of the funds, and there were some dollars left over, would potentially be used for landscaping. We had enough of the funds left to put the trees in that were called for under the landscaping plan. What we did not have enough for is to complete the rest of the landscaping plan, which are shrubs and bushes. There's approximately 245 of those that would go in, and the trenching and drip lines to feed those. So that's what they are requesting.
All right.
So it would, in essence, finish out the plan for the Centennial Circle with 2 exceptions. They have backed off of the low retaining walls that were in there because of the expense. And then the only other item that's on there were the benches, and we are now using the surplus that we have at Fountain Park because we cannot fill all the requests for donations of loved ones for benches and dedications, that at least 5 of those will now transfer over and provide 5 of the 18 benches that are planned for in the circle. So that's the last and final step. But that request is not included in this, it's just landscaping.
On this year's budget, or perhaps part of last year's, what was our overall budget, and where did we come in on Centennial Circle expenditures? Was all the surplus or all the balance that wasn't used put into the foliage, or was there additional dollars not spent that were budgeted?
There were no dollars left. We basically used the balance. You may recall that we had to do some additional work because the as-built that we had on the project were not in fact accurate. So we had to bring both water and electrical into the site, and that cost us some additional dollars. Anything that was left after that, we then applied towards the trees with the trees that you see in there now. Those are all the trees that are proposed to go in the Centennial Circle, as well as providing drip lines to each of those trees.
Do we have assistance from the Library Association on the Centennial Circle area?
Other than one of the monuments, they paid for the signage on that. I'm not aware of anything else. It could be there, I'm just not aware of it.
Okay, thanks. Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. Mark, are the low volt lights included in this 28,000?
I believe they are, yes.
In other words, this would totally complete the icing on the cake around the Centennial Circle.
I believe so, yes.
And you don't by chance have a rendering as to what it would look like with the, what did you say, 240 more plants?
I don't have one with me, but it was the original plan that Mr. Miles had shared with you that the council did approve.
Thank you. I would like to see this go ahead and get finished because it is certainly a centerpiece to our library and community center, and it certainly would add a lot to it.
Councilmember Cantino.
Thank you, Mayor. Mark, can you tell me when you're going to put it in all the rest of this with the electrical and everything, is this going to be used for events then too?
Yes. You may recall that we have a request in this year's budget for $20,000. That's to put the actual electrical into the site. Right now, all we've got is low voltage now to be able to, actually, I think it's a solar panel that actually turns the water on and off to water the trees. We need to bring power into the site and then also extend it over to the Power of Thought, that's the piece in the center. There are 2 electrical boxes there. So that $20,000 would provide pulling the wires and putting boxes on all those locations.
Now,
so every other gravel area, there are 8 gravel areas, 4 of those would have power into the center of them.
Okay. Will we have to remove blocks to do all of this then that were already put down?
No, because I believe that most of it has been sleeved.
Okay. We sure?
Yes.
Most. He said most. All right, Vice Mayor.
I have a question about the downtown fund. Does that come into play at all, or would we want it to?
I guess that's a council question, not necessarily one that I could answer.
Thank you, Mayor. Are we, as far as the CIP goes, does this make us forego anything? Does it make us have to make a choice on capital funds? Is it worth looking to see if we can use other funds for it?
Well, generally, I'd like to see it come in. Obviously, we budget for some things, and they come in quite a bit lower, as we did with the circle itself. So I'd like to see a lot smaller number here, but I do want it finished also, and I think it's on Civic Plaza, so it's in our Cotillo Plaza, and it's a municipal piece of the property, so I think I'd prefer it to be funded through the town rather than the downtown fund. That's just an initial thought, but we can look at other options. Yeah, I'd like to get it done, so do we have a motion on this?
Isn't that a part of the downtown area?
We're part of downtown, yeah.
Yeah, so we could use the downtown funds.
Let's just talk about the dollar amount tonight.
Okay.
Do we want to make a motion on Centennial Circle for $28,000?
Mayor, I move to put $28,000 into the budget to finish the landscaping and the low voltage lighting at the Centennial Circle.
All right, and a second?
Second.
All right. Any other discussion? Anything else, Mark?
No.
All right, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Mayor, 5-0.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay, Mayor, I'll try to be quick so we're not here too much longer. The last thing that I left is transportation out of the special revenue fund. This, again, is not something that is budgeted, but the town has an opportunity to apply for LTAF 2 funds that can only be used for transit. And so what we'd like to talk about is maybe a pilot program. If you recall, a few years ago, Valley Metro was to bring the bus that stops, the transit bus that stops at Mayo Clinic. The plan was to bring it into Fountain Hills by 2014. That got pushed back, I believe, to about 2019 because obviously Valley Metro ran out of money. So what this proposal would be, we're eligible for $63,000. With that $63,000, we can use those funds to have a transit into town, meaning extending the bus that stops at Mayo Clinic into Fountain Hills, and I have a couple of maps of a couple of proposals. And it would require a 25% contribution or matching funds from the town general fund. So in other words, for $63,000, let me see, this is option A, and this would be from Mayo Clinic to Avenue the Fountains. It would be 4 trips a year, and it would be a total of $101,000. So the town's contribution would be $25,000. No, it would be less than that. Whatever it is, it's $101,000, and the town would have to contribute $25,000. However, that math calculation works out. It would be 4 trips from Mayo Clinic extending through downtown area.
Per day.
Per day.
Per day, not per year.
Yes.
Per year.
Yeah, that's pretty expensive.
Alternative B, which is less money, it's a total of $63,000. It would be 4 trips, and it would be going from Mayo Clinic to Target. This would be a regular RPTA or Valley Metro bus, and it would be public, so it would be transportation, and there would be a fare involved. But again, the town would have to pay the money as well. So the other option is, if we don't do this type of program, that we just don't apply for the LTAF 2 grant, the LTAF 2 funds, because it can only be used for transportation.
And it'd be also 4 times a day?
4 times a day, yes.
So option B is being part of Valley Metro's route, and alternative A is a private?
No, they're both the same.
They're both Valley Metro?
2 options from Valley Metro, yes.
Okay, but option A would not have a fare?
Yes, they both would have a fare.
Okay.
Sorry, I wasn't clear.
Okay.
Both would have a fare, both Valley Metro, both public transit. It's just one would extend into the downtown area and obviously cost more money.
And the $63,000, will it be here next year, and where is it coming from?
The $63,000 would be available if we apply. Our first distribution from LTAF 2 will be this fiscal year that we're in. You can carry it over a year because obviously we're not prepared for this, so we could carry it over. We have to apply every year for this LTAF 2 money, which comes from lottery. So it depends on the lottery sales how much it's going to be. We know it's $63,000 this year. We don't know what it's going to be next year or the year after. In all likelihood, because that was one of the funds that the legislature swept last year and got taken to court and had to put it back in because it is federal money for transportation. So it's likely that it will continue, but it isn't known. And we don't even know if there's a demand for this anyway. So that's why we would propose a pilot project just to see if this is something that people would even use. We have no idea. Nobody's called and said, I really need a bus. But again, it would be part of bringing people in to work into Fountain Hills. And if we took it all the way downtown, people would have the ability to go shopping, to go up to Target. So.
Good, well, it's interesting. The $63,000, if we apply for it and get it, the LTAF $2 are there for us to use. What other options can we use it for other things?
It can only be used for transportation. That's probably the only transportation or transit program that we have.
Okay, so we'll have that money available to use for transportation. So which option? But again, I think if we end up going to a pilot or something, the routes might change. We get the feedback, what makes sense and how often, and those types of things. Okay, well, interesting. Councilmember Cantino.
Thank you, Mayor. Personally, I like the first one because it brings people all the way in town. So people that have never been to Fountain Hills, if they want to try to come out here, and you might get more out here, you get more traffic out here, and they'd be able to see the fountain and see different things. And I think also, this is just food for thought, if they could take and maybe have a stop by Target where people could get off to go to Target if they want to, because some people might use transportation to park in that Target lot and then go from there. But I like the idea of coming all the way into Fountain Hills.
Yep, me too.
Would
Vice
there
Mayor?
be- Would there be stops? Would there be stops?
4 stops.
4 stops. And then, would there be public outreach? Would Valley Metro help us with that? Do you know? As far as telling them that it exists and that kind of thing? Could be part of what they do.
I would assume, but
Sure.
I didn't have that specific conversation, but I would assume they would.
And not that I don't want to do this, but wouldn't we be able to also use that money to supplement or help the Give a Lift program? Because it's still transit. I mean, that was what that's what we did before, then they took it away. Then now, I mean, as far as I know, it sounds like that program's going really well, so maybe that's not needed. But just to know that if we took this money, we might have other options in case this doesn't work out.
As long as it is transportation, transit, yes.
Yep.
So the question tonight would be, you want to include it in the budget?
Correct. $63,000.
All right. Councilmember
Plus,
Bourget.
we would have to put matching funds in the general fund, I'm sorry.
Okay.
That was my question. So 63,000, what's that going to cost us? 25%, did you say 25%?
25%, yes.
So that's 15,750, 63, so that brings us up to 78,750. How did you arrive at the 100,000 figure?
101.
That's for the other option.
So-
One option is the 63,000 is the grant amount.
Okay.
So if we chose option A, alternative A, that's the $100,000 program. So the general fund would be paying more money because we only have 63,000 from the grant.
Okay.
Well, we're not going to figure it out tonight, but sounds like, council will make a motion to include the 68 in the budget and figure out where we want to go and what we can afford.
Right.
Any other comments? Wants to make a,
Mayor, move to
Yep.
approve a $63,000 budget item for transportation.
all right.
Second?
All right, any other discussion? All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Mayor, 5-0.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I know we're moving forward, but we actually went by the items that included the household hazardous waste event. I was wondering if we could get a little, that's kind of a big chunk, 45,000, so I was wondering if we could have a little bit more information about that. We don't have to do it right now because if Raymond's not here, but I was wondering, is Scottsdale doing anything like that? Have we tried to, what is that amount for, basically?
Yeah, there's quite a few of them. Thanks. Yep, and I've got your notes too to go over. Paul, how are you?
Good. Mayor, Councilmember Dickey. Yeah, Raymond left, so I'll try to answer the question. We had, since incorporation, we've had one household hazardous waste event, and I wasn't here at the time. It was 2009, and the line was out the door. And it was about $45,000 to hold that event. Raymond did have a grant that paid for half of it. We've looked into those grants and haven't been able to get them for the full amount. Raymond has tried contacting Scottsdale and other municipalities, and there's just a lot of liability involved with the hazardous waste, so they do not want to take the hazardous waste from another city. We have contacted the sanitary district to see if they would want to partner with us, but we haven't heard back from them yet because, you're really trying to avoid people from pouring stuff down the drain, which would ultimately end up in the sanitary district. So the $45,000 would be the cost of the event if we were to fund it fully ourselves.
Okay, Mayor, so you are still looking, did you look at DEQ or anything and see if anything's available?
I would have to check with Raymond, but I'm sure he's pretty thorough and explores all his options.
All righty, thank you.
Would this help with the ducks?
No.
Mayor. Their beaks are already white.
Councilmember Brown?
Thank you, Mayor. And the only other question I would have, has anybody talked to Republic Services about possibly participating and helping us with this?
I'll talk to Raymond, but monetarily they might be able to, but they do not collect that. The landfills will not take hazardous waste. If they even get a load with a truck in, they bring in a hazmat team and they reject the load.
But Republic Services doesn't offer a service to
Not that I'm aware
it
of.
at all? Thank you.
All right. So what do we do with that item,
We don't,
since you brought it up?
well, I don't know, we didn't go through all these things.
No. All right, Julie, what do you suggest? I mean, there are a lot of other items.
There are, I just want to go over one quick one that will be done with, and then if you want to go over these individual expenditures, I thought we'd actually, we were done with them. So let me just really quickly talk about a couple of things that were left unfinished. One is the infrastructure maintenance fund that was an initiative of the council, and we had proposed to pay for that with a dedicated sales tax by increasing the telecommunications tax. So since that is now off the table, we have a couple of other recommendations for how to fund that. One of them today would be if, based on the information today from the state and we have a surplus, that we take that surplus and use that to fund the infrastructure maintenance fund. Again, that is to pay for the major things that are going to be needed over in the future for 20 years, similar to what we do with our vehicle replacement fund. So we plan for those things and put money aside so when they're needed, we have the money there. But obviously, we need some place to charge it to get the money. So these are some options that I had. One would be the CIP and general fund. In other words, pay up front $500,000 from the CIP, and then each year in the general fund, put in a contingency of $275,000 that would go over to that fund. And then another one is a dedicated sales tax, meaning we take a piece of the existing sales tax and just pay as you go, appropriate it out of the general fund, use one-time revenues, in other words, construction sales tax or building permit fees, that would accumulate and pay as you go. Or there's also debt financing for voter-approved or MPC bonds, but we still need a dedicated revenue source to pay back.
One item, or is that a good?
That is one item. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get through this. This is to establish the infrastructure maintenance fund. We need to find a revenue source for that. We don't have to do that tonight.
Good, thank you.
Okay, that one was easy.
All righty.
And the other thing is talking about, we put the community contacts back to what they were. We want to start moving forward with the groups and start talking about what we want them to do. And there were several initiatives that in the councils at retreat that were very tourism related. And let me bring that page up. Oh, it's not on this list, sorry. Those things were Tourism Bureau to promote town trails and bicycle system, promote through Valley Sports Stores. There were several initiatives that could be tied into the tourism contract. So we just wanted to, if we're going to move forward, that's what we'll start meeting with those groups and coming up with that scope of work.
Good.
Okay, we can go back now to the expenditures, the proposed expenditures.
All right. And any other remaining toolbox items do we need to get through? We're over the toolbox, all right.
These are new items, again, and we're happy to talk about anything that's in the budget that isn't new.
Can we just go to the top of the first, the toolbox items, just that slide?
I don't have that slide here. This is the one with the yes/no columns.
Starts with the budget and brief.
Decreased recreation
there it is.
subsidy. Thought it was on here.
Oh.
Okay.
That one. Did we go, what was decreased recreation subsidy? Did we move on that?
We didn't specifically talk about it. Again, it was something that we, philosophically, some of the programs that we run, we're going to decrease the subsidy on some of those programs, not youth programs or other programs like that, but there are programs that are very popular that, we're just going to charge a little bit more so the citizens aren't constantly subsidizing every recreation program. It was just a philosophical discussion about $35,000 a year.
Oh, okay.
But it wasn't to start charging everybody for every program and make them all full cost recovery. That wasn't it at all. It was just to kind of level it off a little bit.
Okay. And just want to make sure I don't miss anything. All right, go back to where you were, Julie. Sorry. Oh, the couple of things that were brought up, the citizen survey. Is that, it was something that Ms. Bordeaux brought up. Do you want to speak to that piece more, or do we know where those dollars, that dollar amount came from and what we're looking to do?
Mayor, members of the council, that was actually an initiative that came out of the Strategic Planning Advisory Commission, and they actually came up with the dollar amount to put in. That is the amount that we paid for the last citizen survey that we had, and I can't remember the name of the company that did it. I think they were out of Texas. But the goal with the citizen survey is to, if we do another one, that we pretty much mirror the first one so that you can see how we've improved or changed. So it's a citizen survey based on the last survey, and that way you can measure how we are doing. So that they came up with the $30,000. The $5,000 was just the number we put in for the road bond postmortem, but we can do that with a simple survey monkey and doesn't cost anything.
Well, think just assuming we want to move forward on some sort of a survey, what's the process we might have to determine which kind we want to do? And I mean, we might put a dollar amount in the budget, but we're not moving forward with it until we discuss what we want to have and how it's going to look and who it's going to reach out to, right? So I don't think we need to get into all those details tonight, but we do want to indicate whether or not council wants to consider a survey that would also include the postmortem.
Yes, and this is just a planning document. The survey, if it's in the budget, then it's the Strategic Planning Advisory Commission wants to move forward with it. It would come back to the council anyway. There would be council input, so you definitely will see it more.
Like many of the things we put in the budget, they come in less, or we shrink down. Just last week, we shrunk that down quite a bit. Councilmember Leger?
Yeah, just going forward, I think we used ETC, and they were out of Kansas City, and we had a citizen this evening talk about methodology. And ETC has been doing municipal surveys for 40 years, and I'm sure that they can incorporate any type of methodology. They did phone calls on the last one. They weren't robocalls, and it wasn't 100%. But there's a variety of methodology. But they're the folks. If we're looking at comparative baseline data, they did the first survey.
A lot of things change. Technology changes, different ways of getting information. Home, very, very few people have home, very much smaller percentage have home phones now. Yeah. So we've got to be smart about trying to get the statistically valid survey. So we'll get more input on how to do a survey and who to use and that sort of thing. Ms. Bordeaux, you want to add one thing? Okay. Thanks, Julie.
Just to be fair, so you can compare apples to apples, I'd be happy to contact the company and get a full detailed outlining and price point. That I gave them a high figure just so you would see what the worst case scenario would be at $7,000. So I'll dig a little deeper and get them to give you a proposal in writing.
Well, since you went to Citizens Academy, you know who to get it to.
That's right.
All
right. Thank you.
Anything more on that survey thing? I think we want to move forward on it, but we'll figure out how much to spend and how to do it. All right. What's next, Julie?
I'm not sure if you want to go through these one by one. The biggest one obviously is the major facilities maintenance. I don't know if Paul wants to talk, if you want to get into all that detail of what all that means, or if there's anything you just want to take out.
It's kind of difficult to tell where we're going to end up, with what we talked about. So I don't want to spend a whole ton of time on a lot of those items until we get since we've touched on quite a few and put them in and taken them out. I'd like to know where we're going to be at.
Okay.
So what do you guys, council, what do you think on the major facilities maintenance? Do we need a briefing on that tonight? Probably. I would think a little bit, but maybe not a great amount of detail yet to start picking which project to do or which one not to do within that 350.
Okay, again, this is already in the budget, the $350,000, and we pretty much have a balanced budget, so.
All right, good evening again, Mayor and Council. What I can do is I can give you a spreadsheet and put it in your mailboxes, and this shows everything we've done last year and what we have proposed this year. And I know one good example is, building maintenance repair at the Library Museum. We had a $175 budget last year, and now we're looking at about $33,000. It includes carpeting for the library, you know, replacement of card access, door power supplies, things like that. So that's what you'll see throughout this maintenance that's been put off that we're finally trying to get around to. So you really have to look through about 15 pages of line by line looking at the differences. So I can give you more information right now if you want, but
We mentioned the carpeting. Didn't we just do the carpeting over there?
in the library, not the museum.
Oh, museum. Thank you. All right, we'll get a spreadsheet.
Okay.
Pick it apart. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I think let's keep going. Parks, parking lot maintenance, 36,000.
yes.
Seems to probably be pretty self-explanatory.
Correct.
Something, there are lots that need attention.
Correct.
Okay.
And obviously some increased programming for toddlers and teen events. The citizen satisfaction survey we already talked about. The cost of living / merit, again, we would propose that it be merit, not cost of living. If we want to talk about that.
Yeah, that's a good one to talk about.
Okay.
We approved the 1% last year because it was difficult to afford, obviously, or we were just flattening, or, you know, we weren't seeing much improvement. We're not in much different place today. Although, and like we said last time, our staff is doing more with less, and so on, and of course we value them greatly, and through the citizens. I just don't think we're quite at this number yet where we can consider the merit. I personally think we're going to have to consider more of a flat approach without the merit, and it'll be a lesser amount. That's what I think we're still at. We're not out of this yet. And I know that there weren't a whole lot of other communities that gave increases, and not that we can compare our staff against other staffs. Our staff's the best in the world, but I think we're going to probably have to consider a smaller amount and more of a flatter amount as we did last year. That's my initial thought, but I know there are lots of things to consider in that, competitiveness and the economy coming back and losing great staff, and we want to make sure we mitigate those things wherever possible and be smart about it. So, but my first thought is that we wouldn't be at that amount, and it wouldn't be merit yet. But Councilmember Leger didn't hear anything I said, so he'll share his comments. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Julian, the projected to 16-17 are the raises in there, and are they continued? That's one of the things you always think about when you do give a raise, is that it's obviously continued and probably even more so.
Mayor, Vice Mayor Dickey, the projection to 16-17 takes the current year budget, meaning next year's budget, and there's an inflation factor of, I think, 3% in general, so it's not piece by piece, so it would be 3% in each budget, each divisional budget. But if I could just comment on the merit, because I totally understand, the perception in the public and the economy we're going through, but I have to tell you that the economy is picking back up. For one thing, we have a completely balanced budget with a surplus, and my concern would be is we're going to start losing people because other communities are hiring. They are hiring at higher rates than what we're paying, number one. Number two, we, other cities were a lot further behind us when they had to do the cutting. We cut early, so we didn't have to dig into reserves. We didn't have to do the draconian cuts. We managed it along very well. So they're still catching up, whereas we've been trying to manage it all along. So my concern would be that if the message we give to the employees is that, we are likely to lose employees if we, don't give them some kind of a merit.
And also the part where I think last year's flat, even though it's just 1%, made sense is we haven't been giving anything. So the merit, would have left some with zero, even though they hadn't been getting any raises for a number of years, and given the folks with the merit very, very little. So the amount was so small last year, it wouldn't even make sense to go through the practice that Joan mentioned, having to go through to divvy up the merit increase. I think we might be in a similar spot. But I appreciate what you're saying, because we are getting into a more competitive market, and and we want to remain competitive, 4-day, decent salary, good benefit program that we just talked about, and not raising that cost. Those types of things, we got to play it all in a balance and be smart about it while we're being frugal with our dollars. So, Councilmember Leger, I just mentioned perhaps going to a more of a flat amount of cost of living and a smaller number to begin with. If this is 2.5%, maybe a 1% or a 1.5% flat as something to consider going forward on. But I think we'll have more discussion of this beyond tonight, so I don't know if it's something to move on tonight, but that's just kind of the direction I'm thinking where we'd end up, because this is an item that gets a lot of attention, and I wanted to speak to it tonight. But there are other things to factor in along the lines of what you shared, and I know Ken will chime in as well next time we talk about it, likely. Council, you want to add anything to this? Vice Mayor?
The 2%, would it be around 55,000? Do you know? I mean, I think I'd be okay with a flat 2%, especially if you said the cost of living is 3.1 or something like that.
I think you're probably pretty close to that's what it would be at.
So I'd be fine with that.
Last year was $24,000 or something, 28,000 in total. I think it was under 30. So 2% would be double that, roughly. Council, anything else on this, or talk about it more completely next time? Okay. All right. So that's it on that. Is that big help?
Okay, so we'll leave the amount in and we'll have further discussion, because again, we want to put the budget together for April 1st.
Yeah, let's talk about, let's have a little more for us to talk about related to how we make that decision best for our staff and for our town. You shared a lot of good things. Let's maybe get something of that, like that, out to the council, and also perhaps help us understand what other cities and towns are doing, or if there's other ways to address this that are innovative or whatever, and then we can make a decision.
And also, or if you can give us any sort of a report on grants or anything that we know our employees are directly responsible for getting a lot of revenue into this town, and I think that would be relevant.
Yeah, and we did a good job either last year or the year before recognizing some of those, and that, that's hard to ignore, that's for sure. And it's really not about the value of the employees here, so it's about what you can afford and where we are in the recovery, and that's how we have to approach it, obviously, to be responsible up here. They're worth more than we're going to be able to afford as the increase. We haven't been able to give them raises up till last year, and that was less than cost of living. Were there other items on that page? Law enforcement, fire, those are contracted already?
Right.
Okay. Is there anything else we missed?
No, I think that's it, Mayor.
We get into the Capitol now? I'm just kidding.
Again, thank you so much to the mayor and the council. Our goal is to put the budget document finally together. Again, it's just a planning document. It's not final. It's just to get a document, get it out there, get out to the public, start giving them an opportunity to see what's in it, get some feedback, and then we will be meeting again. I think we have three nights in a row at the end of April for work study to go over the detail again, and then finally, hopefully, adopt it tentatively by the end of May with final adoption in June.
Good, and let me just say, Julie, thank you very much again. You helped manage this, and with your great staff, put this together thus far, as well as being our interim town manager. So kudos to you and your team. So thank you very much, and also to thank the Executive Budget Committee and all those, some of the commissioners that had comments to help us consider some things, and thanks for having so many things on the table for us to consider. It's not easy to talk about all those items, but we wanted to make sure everything's on the table, and I think we certainly did that. So.
Well, good. Well, thank you, Mayor, and we do have a great staff, and everybody's put in a lot of hard work on this, so we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, where are we? Agenda. We're in the middle? No, we're at the last item. I think it's just adjournment, but I ought to make sure I follow this, not miss anything. All right, next item, adjournment. We have a-
So moved.
Second?
Second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you.